the vast majority of people, the vast majority of the time, are not afraid of being wrong. They're not afraid of the bare fact of making a mistake. They're afraid of feeling that they have been wrong. It's the feeling of being wrong that they're afraid of. And this is a tremendous obstacle to friendship, ambition, and just plain curiosity and the experiencing of new things in life for people of all ages. And we're talking about friendships and romantic relationships, combinations of different kinds of people at different ages. I'm 44. Why do you think it is I have so few friends who are older than myself? Now, Melissa has seen me being very charming and sometimes entertaining a whole table full of people, sometimes one-on-one people older than myself. Um, I mean, probably the single most extreme example are these bizarre dinners I've had with my own mother and sometimes with other guests at the table that Melissa has seen, or I'm very witty and charming. And my mother is basically astonished at different points during the conversation at how well informed I am about some obscure topic, normally about history and politics, these kinds of things. But sometimes it's something else. Sometimes it's something to do with the laws of physics or something. And she's also always astonished how sharp my memory is. I'm able to recall things that happened 30 years ago that are sometimes funny and embarrassing and so on. And kind of one of the running gags in these very lighthearted and entertaining conversations is I say to her, you know, Gail, you have so much respect, for my opinion. You have so much respect for me intellectually. And you're always saying what an amazing memory I have. She says, I have a photographic memory. I have this amazing memory until the moment I remember something that is embarrassing to you, that is inconvenient for you, that you want to pretend didn't happen. There are many ways in which my mother is a likable character. I think actually when we first got together, Melissa's just here off camera. I think that was really unexpected for you because I'd kind of prepared you before meeting my parents. Now, look, you've got to be ready for who these people are. And, we had these really delightful dinner conversations. And my mother has met up with her parents and they had a delightful dinner conversation, just in terms of the level of kind of witty repartee and so on. Yeah. But you've got to keep in mind, we're talking about my mother. We are talking about someone who supported Joseph Stalin, someone who supported Mao Zedong, someone who is deeply committed to supporting some of the most notorious ideas and ideals in the history of the world with the largest body count. And then someone who was also really committed to lying about it, including lying to her own family. So there are many moments when the kind of witty repartee suddenly takes on an icy tone, and it's like, no. You can bullshit other people that way. You can't bullshit me that way. My mother is perhaps the most extreme example imaginable of someone who is not afraid to be wrong, who is not afraid to make mistakes. She actually has a kind of still sort of childlike insouciance about herself that way. She's actually quite willing to learn new things by making mistakes or by saying things that turn out to be preposterous or false. She isn't that kind of hesitant, reluctant figure. But she remains terrified of feeling that she is in the wrong. She loathes and hates being wrong and having to stop and reflect on how wrong she was or how wrong she is now. That's the situation of a younger man speaking to an older woman, obviously, right? That situation where I know more about communism than my own mother ever will know. And I am an anti-communist and a pro-democracy sort of person, in brief. And my mother, her whole life is committed to being a communist. Melissa has seen me interacting with some of my professors. My professors are all at least 10 years older than me, 15 years older than me. Any one of those guys could be my friends to this day, right? And she's a lot. It's been mentioned for years and years. All these professors I've gone out to lunch with, I've gone out to dinner with, I've socialized with them outside of class. Sometimes it's at a conference, but really just going to restaurants. and there's a very high level of wit and wisdom and repartee being exchanged. And many of these professors have said that they consider me extraordinarily brilliant. A few have used the word genius. I've had professors tell me that they thought I was one of the most brilliant minds of my generation. That only, I remember one professor, his way of putting it was that he thought that only a few guys were born per generation on the whole planet at my level. Very flattering thing to say. And I have my own, by the way, very cynical way of responding to that too, because I know what it means from their perspective, frankly. But setting aside the psychopathology of that kind of praise, we haven't gotten any dinner invitations, have in in the last 12 months, say. Can you remember any of my professors? Yeah, we were in Toronto. Did any of my professors from the University of Toronto invite me to meet up with them? Any of my old colleagues there? But I mean, in theory, we could have been invited to meet someone in New York City. There were no older people of any description here in Victoria and Vancouver and Toronto and what in Paris. We've traveled around the world so much. But specifically talking about university professors, I do know people. I have known people all over the world, and even if they regard what I've done with my life with a certain degree of horror, there's also a certain degree of admiration and envy and jealousy. There always is, and there's always curiosity too. Why do you think it's so hard for these older people to be friends with me? Now let's turn it around. I'm going to deal with a couple of examples that have different levels of stakes involved. I'm partly responding here to a video by J.J. McCullough, where he said a number of idealistic things that I do not think are wrong because they're idealistic. I just think they're wrong. And J.J. McCullough is taking on the very high stakes example of a 21-year-old young man who was involved with 4chan fascism, shall we say, the kinds of neo-Nazism and racism that are on the internet, and where nobody involved is quite sure how serious they are, to what extent it's a joke, playing around with far right-wing ideology. And then this 21-year-old gentleman got himself basically put in jail for taking government secrets and posting them on the internet, which, to all reports, he did just for the sake of his own notoriety. In parlance of our times, for the sake of his own clout, to build up his rapport with his audience. And JJ suggests in this video that, we all have to reflect on the responsibility we have as older and wiser people to get out there and befriend teenagers. 21-year-old, the age gap is going the other way. Now, again, I'm quite easy to get along with. I've just been giving these funny examples. But even when you're talking about university professors who are communists, Melissa has seen me talking face to face with some real live communists lately. I was very surprised when you said that. So afterwards, actually more than a week afterwards, Melissa said she wondered if there was going to be a fist fight. She wondered if I was actually going to punch out one of these guys who was a real. I was very surprised because I was so witty and charming and the whole time I was the life of the party. It was that kind of situation, and I didn't feel that way, but I didn't think we were on we were on the edge of a fist fight breaking out. But maybe you're right. I mean, maybe you were picking up. I was sorry, but it was a situation where, from my perspective, I was just being witty and charming. But you want to talk about communism with me? I know a lot about communism. It's not, and I'm not just playing to win. It's not like I'm trying to humiliate this guy, and it's not a debate. It's not a blood sport of trying to win or lose. But I'm just engaged in this kind of erudite conversation with the guy. But it's true, he was getting emotionally deranged as the conversation went on. So maybe you're right. Maybe it was closer to a fist fight than I realized. But in any case, we'll never know. But yeah, I was very surprised that Melissa said she wondered when I was face to face with this guy and he wasn't a moderate communist. He was an extremist. He's a currently active communist. If that was going to actually get hostile. And no, I was witty and charming. And that guy also is not going to be inviting us to dinner anytime soon. I don't think we have any lunch dates lined up with that guy. I've met him and had this very memorable sort of conversation with him. Okay. What most people are afraid of, what they're avoiding, is the feeling of being wrong. Do you know what it's like to sit down and talk to an 18-year-old, a 19-year-old, a 20-year-old, a 21-year-old, and really let them know that they're wrong, where that's not a footnote in the conversation. That's the point of the conversation. Do you know how hard that is? And not everybody is witty and charming and detached like me. Not everyone's willing to have a laugh at their own expense. So when I say I'm being witty and charming, I make fun of myself a lot during that same conversation. Okay, I won't even get into it. I said a lot of things insulting myself. I was really making fun of myself also during the conversation. It's not. It's not. I'm not trying to score points. I'm not trying to win. I'm not trying to humiliate the other person in the conversation, even though I think they're not just incorrect. I think they're wrong in the sense of being morally evil in that case. But you have to be prepared for that in life. You have to realize. So I'm ethnically Jewish, but the actual religion of Judaism and practices like circumcision, cutting off part of the penis from an infant, I think that's evil and morally wrong. So if I'm talking to someone, which often enough happens, if I'm talking to someone who's a practicing Orthodox Jew, happened at the same party actually. I can be witty and detached and charming, but there's actually a really deep divide there, right? The same if I was talking to a practicing Muslim, so on and so forth. I'm a vegan whenever I'm talking to a practicing meat eater. Anyway, it's very, very striking to me. What are the assumptions built into this sort of idealistic proposal from JJ McCullough that we should all get out there and start befriending, 19-year-olds. Now, I'm gonna say my own thought about this has changed in response to kind of empirical experience and the long-term anthropological experiment that is my life. My feeling when I was growing up was that the school system really trained us to only socialize with people who were exactly the same age as ourselves, and that was unhealthy. And I remember growing up with that and really seeing, like, boy, like, you guys really think the difference between 11 and being 13 is like this insuperable obstacle, and this is really unnatural. Like just a couple of centuries ago, I don't know, an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old working on the same farm would talk to each other, you know what I mean? Where there's this barrier, like, no, this is the class for 11-year-olds, this is for 12-year-olds, this is for 13-year-olds, and that's it. You just socialize with people who are at the same level of immaturity as yourself, the same level of ignorance, and the same level of dysfunction. So, I think I could say I came into the game with a strong bias in favor of JJ's position. And just add, I had many older brothers. I also had a couple of older sisters. But, I was really aware that I was growing up deprived of any kind of advice or guidance or help from my older brothers, whereas other kids had exactly that. So having an older brother who was already in university when you were applying to enter university could be incredibly useful. In my case, my older brothers were old enough. I could have had an older brother who had finished university when I was starting university, and that could be incredibly helpful. Applying to get a job. Well, if you have an older brother who's already applied for a job at the local coal mine, he can walk you through stuff. I was really aware of this. And, I grew up in a multicultural neighborhood. So I saw Greek families and Italian families and African-American families, Caribbean Black families, so Korean families. I saw all kinds of different families. And I never had this problem of trying to normalize my own family. I was quite comfortable with abnormalizing my family, regarding as abnormal my own crazy white communist, half Jewish, half white communist family. Like, I don't think this is normal. I don't think it's normal to have an older brother you've only spoken to once in your entire life. Like, that really was my situation. Oh yeah, I met that guy twice. Yeah. With each of them, it's a slightly different story. I'm like, oh yeah, maybe 3 times in my life I met that guy. Yeah, right. Yeah, I've seen a photograph of him. Yeah, and I did have brothers I'd never met even once growing up. So that was my experience. I'm saying this kind of prejudiced my perspective of the problem. I'm seeing that on the one hand, it's kind of unnatural to separate people out year by year into these strata as our school system does. The other hand, the critique of family structure in my own family and what can be learned hypothetically from one's elders. Okay, you get out into the real world. Again, okay, which do I want to attack first, the chicken or attack the egg? I can ask you this, no matter what age you are watching this video. Some of you are 19, but you already relate to this because you've been 19 trying to give advice to someone who's 17. Well, what happens when you give a younger person advice and you know it is exactly the advice they need to hear in exactly their circumstances, and then they don't follow it, or they don't care, or they even insult you or laugh at you? What next? You know, what do you do next? Now, different people cope with these things in different ways. You must realize if you're providing counseling, if you're providing advice, especially if it's advice nobody wants to hear, it's advice they didn't ask for and they don't appreciate, and it's ruining their hopes and dreams or something. It's the opposite of what they want to believe. Instead of reinforcing their delusions, reinforcing what they want to believe. What happens next? I want to use an example that's already in the thumbnail for this video, and I've added him in the description of this video. He may join us later because I've added Hamza. So there is this guy on YouTube, Hamza. We don't know his age. He's maybe 26 or something. He's not such a young pup, but he's immature for his age. Now, Hamza is a YouTuber. We just saw a video of his that reached fully 800,000 viewers. He's reaching a terrifying number of viewers with his message. Now, there are things he's morally incorrect about. There are things that he's politically incorrect about, really. I know the term politically incorrect is a bit tainted, but it's not a punchline in this case. Take it seriously, but there are even kind of simple scientific matters of fact that he's incorrect about. And in this recent video we both looked at together, he's reaching an audience of 800,000 people. And he's giving you one false scientific claim after another about health, about diet, about hygiene. And what they all revolve around is manliness, virility, testosterone levels, how you can be more manly through a checklist of wildly unscientific, what we call in this day and age, bro science. And hilariously, every so often he mentions that his own mother doesn't respect his opinion on these things, and that he has conflicts around the dinner table. I don't know how often he eats with his mother, but his mother is horrified, for example, that he adds salt to everything. He believes salt makes him stronger and more virile, and he even adds salt to his drinking water. So when he drinks a glass of water, he adds salt to it, in addition to adding salt to his meat and his vegetables. So he drinks salt water. So it's understandable. I assume his mother is not a science expert or a nutrition expert, but she is horrified by this. And she says to him, look, you're going to kill yourself with this high salt diet. And he says, no, mom, fact, 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 fact. He has these cherry picked facts to back up his bro science worldview that salt is an important nutrient and only makes you stronger, and that there's some crazy conspiracy theory behind the notion that excess salt is terrible for your health. Okay. What do you think you can do for him as a friend? If you are the older and wiser party, right? Like, you can be more intelligent than someone, right? And you can show them what it's like to be more intelligent than them, right? You can't do the thinking for them. You can't do the understanding for them. You can't do the feeling for them. And how do they react to you being more intelligent, better informed, more wise, or simply being right where they're wrong? Because, by the way, it's a situation I'm not in that often in life. You can talk to someone who's not very intelligent and not very well informed. They just happen to be right about this one thing, and you're wrong. For me, that's delightful. It's not a problem. When it happens, it's great. It's a learning experience for me. I'm happy to have it happen to me. Once in a while that happens too. How does this younger person respond to a so-called friend lording their superiority over them? Yes, you can tell yourself that you are doing this for their own good, for their own benefit, right? But that is not their perspective. Sorry. It is just mind-blowing to me that J.J. McCullough imagines that, he or someone like him or you or I could get on the phone with or get on Discord with this 21-year-old neo-Nazi and talk him out of his neo-Nazism as a friend. Like, what's the basis of this friendship? What you are really imagining is a relationship of authority, is a relationship of command, is a relationship of compulsion, and of you as the older and wiser person being able to compel the younger person to, obey you or agree with you. And as you know, in this day and age, not even school teachers have that power. To a very limited extent, do parents have the power? Certainly, when someone's 21 years old, they don't have to listen to their parents, and nobody can make them. So there's more than one kind of complex delusion here. I mean, just I feel like I need to really look at it and unpack. Okay, I have a little bit of expertise in a lot of different fields, right? Um, I've been in the situation of talking to quite a few different people at all different ages who told me that their dream in life was to do humanitarian work in Cambodia or humanitarian work in Laos. Okay, well, I worked in that field. I studied in that field. I was out there in a certain number of years of my life from life. Maybe I have wisdom to share with them as a friend, right? Do they want to hear it? Do they want to be my friend? What if the wisdom and advice I have to share is the exact opposite of everything they want to hear and everything they want to believe and so on? What happens next? And what happens when they don't take my advice and then the predictable negative consequences follow? In most cases, they will never talk to me again. I'll never hear. But sometimes you do. Sometimes people get back in touch with you or you bump into them or something. I have actually been in a situation where I bumped into a guy. As I recall, this was just literally on the sidewalk. And I was like, oh, hey, so what happened with this project you were trying to do in Laos? Humanitarian, kind of vaguely humanitarian project. And he was like, oh, well, this, and this happened, and this was impossible this reason, this is impossible this reason. I said to him, like, do you not remember you and I had lunch together once, and I gave you like a blow-by-blow checklist of exactly why this project was going to be impossible? And it was exactly like I told you exactly what you needed to hear before he started the project. And I remember he was drinking a beer, and he had a friend with him who was also, they weren't drunk, but they were drinking beer. And I remember, they were white guys speaking in a strong accent. They're like, oh, nah, it'll be fine. It'll be no problem. Like, this is the response you get. Now, again, there's a question of stakes, right? There's a question of how high are the stakes in these things. Are you talking about a teenage incel who's going to carry out a mass shooting? Are you talking about a teenager who's gotten involved in fascism? Are you talking about a teenager who's got involved in communism? Are you talking about someone in their 20s who's become communist? Someone in their 30s? Someone in their 40s? I have experienced all these things, right? I have experience with university professors who are at retirement age. They're still fucking true believing communists. And of course, you meet professors who are still true believing Catholics and Muslims and everything else. But people can be wrong at any age, right? But like there's this assumption that just because you are in the role of being the older and wiser party, that other people are willing to listen. Okay. I asked you before, like, obviously it's a rhetorical question, dear viewer. I realize you're not going to respond. Do you think any of those university professors have invited me out to dinner, lately in the past year? Okay, well, you guys probably know there are a lot of younger people have helped through this channel. Some of you have just seen fan mail that I posted to Patreon or posted on my blog or something, or it gets mentioned here, whatever. There are people who say they don't have to be that young to be younger than me, right? And they say, oh, yeah, you changed my whole life. And I'll just give a theoretical example. I get people write in and say they quit smoking marijuana because of this YouTube channel. They quit using antidepressants because of this YouTube channel. They quit drinking alcohol. They quit playing video games. Sometimes all of the above. Sometimes one person did all these things. There's different people. There are people who just said they really hadn't read a book in many years, and they sat down and got serious about their own kind of political education and philosophy and taking life seriously. There are people who were aspiring political activists who've written to me and said they changed everything they were doing Because, for example, they had a model of political activism that revolved around standing on the sidewalk, chanting, holding a placard and chanting. And they realized through my YouTube channel, this isn't real politics at all. This touchstone of authenticity, the street protest, doesn't represent real politics and a route to real political progress. It's utterly phony. It's a mirage. It's leading them the wrong way through the desert. And that there is this other way. Or there are many other ways, but there's also the particular way I'm I'm endorsing and talking about my videos and books. So there are a lot of younger people whose lives have been changed by this channel. Mostly for the better, some for the worse. There are some people, and it's changed life for the worse. I remember I got an email from someone who just said, "Look, I've tried to live this life of the mind you set out. I can't do it." I had one person ever in this channel wrote in and said, "Look, they quit playing video games and I don't know, they quit going to nightclubs or something, and decided to buckle down and finally read Aristotle." And they kind of took on. I mean, by the way, each one of these people has their own interpretation of what the philosophy of à-bas-le-ciel means in practice. That's part of the beauty of it. I don't give you a 12-step course of exactly what to do. They're inspired by my channel to do something, to take my ideas and bring them in the direction. But this person said they really tried to be an intellectual and live a life of mind, and they just can't do it. They just don't have what it takes. And I believe them. I really do. I mean, I've, whatever, empirical experience. That's okay, let's just go back to Bush here. So these older people in my life who've come and gone, and some of whom said I'm so brilliant and so on, so such a positive impression of me, and who have the experience of a dinner party with me or eating lunch with me and know how charming and entertaining I can be, apart from, saving the planet or whatever the fuck you want to actually accomplish. Yeah, none of those people, none of those people are calling me up to have dinner. Well, what about the even larger number of younger people we've just described? One of the things I'm told most often, and again, I believe people when they say it, is like, normally it's after we start having a conversation and they say, "Oh, wow, like you're so friendly, you're so helpful. I didn't think talking to you would be like this." One of the things I hear again and again is, "I wanted to talk to you for years, but I never tried because I was so intimidated." They're so intellectually intimidated at the thought of talking to me. And whenever people tell me, I say, "Good, be intimidated." Like, whatever the fuck it is you're afraid about, I'm not going to talk you out of it, right? People are not afraid of being wrong. People are not afraid of making mistakes. You talk to a 21-year-old kid who's got his mind made up about what he wants to do with his life. He is in effect going to say to you, no, let me make my own mistakes. I don't want your wisdom. I don't want your experience. I don't want to be right. I'd rather be wrong. I'd rather make my own mistakes than learn from your experience and thus avoid repeating the same mistakes you made. Dead ass, people. Dead ass serious. That's the spirit of our times. And I don't even think that's culturally specific. I think the French are like that. I think the Germans are like that. I think the British are like that. We spend a lot of time in China. I think the Chinese are like that. I think the Japanese are like that. Every culture I've dealt with around the world, like, admittedly, I have never lived and worked in Africa. There's some parts of the world I don't know that well. But I am going out on a limb and saying this is a really kind of global phenomenon. There's an old phrase you guys might not know. I mean, this has kind of gone out of vogue. Quote, "I can do bad all by myself." You guys remember that one? The point is, I'd rather do bad all by myself than do good on your terms all than. And okay, look, so there's more than one perspective to think about here. If you're the older person, on what terms does the friendship continue? Like, it's just heartbreaking for you every day to watch this person ruining their life and doing the wrong thing again and again. What are you going to do? Again and again, talk to them and have the same conversation? And again, in reality, the ages can be anything else. There is a person somewhere in the world. I'm going to anonymize this as much as possible. There is a person who once had a phone call with Melissa, and once ever. And this is an older person, someone older than me and older than Melissa, whose whole life has been fucked up by psych meds, by antidepressants. This is one of those people who at any time is on 6 different drugs. Oh yeah, Lamictal, Haldol, Topamax, Prozac, whatever it is. This is someone who for decades, has been on these drugs, and they're still fucking crazy. Nothing got better. It didn't cure them. It didn't improve them. They're, of course, like all these people, they're going down the drain because the brain damage done by these drugs, which is not a theory, which is a scientifically proven fact. In most cases, it says it on the freaking FDA label. So I'm doing this when I say FDA label. The FDA label is several pages long, in case you didn't know these days. You got to look it up, read a PDF on the internet to read the FDA label. Most doctors don't read the FDA label. But even just the FDA label for these drugs normally admit really negative side effects and brain damage has been proven and so on. Okay, so, let's imagine both ways. Let's imagine Melissa has a friend who right now is 21 years old, and they are using drugs that cause permanent, irreparable brain damage every day. And they believe. They believe they're going to get better. They believe it's going to solve their problems. You've seen me take this on my YouTube channel 100 times, guys. You've seen me really reach out to and try to interact with people who are ruining their lives this way. You've seen me try to help people. Did it help? I mean, sorry, remember not Banana Blondie, Supreme Banana. So shortly after I made a video challenging Supreme Banana and her prescription drug use, she quit using the drug. I have no idea if there's a connection. But I know that. I know a short time after I made that video, she quit using the meds. And she did talk about it with her fans and some I don't know if it was on Twitter or what. I didn't see her hear it, but she talked about her reasons for giving up. I think she deleted her earlier videos endorsing these drugs. I have no idea if it's part of that. We do know Unnatural Vegan has heard my critique of her. Unnatural Vegan, we got her after I pointed out that she is taking these drugs during pregnancy. And the drugs are scientifically proven to have a negative effect on the unborn baby, the fetus, whatever you want to say. She made a video admitting that. Look, we don't know. My point is, I have reached out to people through the magic of the internet to some extent, trying to help these people. Right, but that's one moment of time. Making those videos, none of those videos took me even a whole day. We could figure, whatever. It took me a couple of hours. And I know I'm helping a certain number of people, even if they never help me back. Which I think is the truth. I think unless a couple of you are donating $1 a month on Patreon, I get nothing out of this. I'm just doing it because it's the right thing to do. Okay, so that's 3 hours out of one day. Once I make a video saying, hey, here are the hard scientific facts about these drugs. Here's what you got to know. Here's how this person is ruining their life. Don't be like them. Be like me. It's a wrap. That's not what friendship is like. Whether you're thinking of this older woman, it's not a relative of Melissa's, by the way. It's not anyone in her family. But this older woman, she had one phone call with once. And I mean, I remember I was just in the room. It's like, what the fuck are you going to say to this person? Like, what are you going to say? Like, no. This isn't like the CBS News, homie. This isn't like you're watching fucking broadcast news where they interview the person from the Republican Party and they interview the person from the Democrat Party, and the host sits there and very sagaciously says, well, in the end, I suppose the truth is halfway in between. No. There's right and there's wrong. The drugs work or they don't. They cause brain damage or they don't. And guess what? Like, no, there's no compromise. If you talk to me today, I'm going to tell you I'm right, you're wrong, you're killing yourself, and like hundreds of thousands of other people are ruining their lives with this shit. It's an epidemic. If you talk to me tomorrow, it's the same fucking story. You can't call me up a couple months from now and wish me a Merry Christmas or some shit. That's what people are your friends. They want to fucking do. They want to call you up, whatever, because it's the Super Bowl. What is it now? I don't even fucking know. It's the NHL playoffs or something. Oh, hey, it's the NHL playoffs. How are you doing? I just want to see if you guys were doing okay. People, it's like, yeah, are you still fucking, taking a soldering iron and burning holes in your brain as a fucking recreational sport? Like, are you still pretending that being on these drugs for 10 years has alleviated any of the symptoms that you reported to a psychiatrist in the first place to get you on the drugs? Because guess what? You're still fucked up. You still have all exactly the same problems you had. It's just now you also have a prescription drug addiction and accumulating brain damage. And your sleep is fucked up, and your heart rate is fucked up, and your digestion is fucked up, and your flatulence is fucked up. Like, sorry, there are all kinds of side effects. Really, even flatulence is a huge side effect. Your sleep and your night, all these fucking effects. You know, um, okay, but you can imagine whether it's Melissa or it's me. If we're talking to an older person, to use a very non-vegan image, the kid gloves are off. You can say that. Say, "Oh yeah, how the fuck you doing?" Okay, what if it's this 21-year-old kid? What? Melissa's laughing her ass off. I think you're laughing her because I do that. I'm the one person who's got the balls to do this shit. I don't just joke about this shit on the internet. I really live this life, people. I really do. Anyway, telling truths, other people would consider too terrible to tell. I really do that. And if you don't, you never know. You never know what would have happened if you told someone the truth. If you just politely evade situation. Okay, well, what about when it's a 21-year-old kid? What about when you're the older, more mature, and more wise person? You're talking of 19, 20, 20, whatever it is. You're talking to someone young enough that they have to be treated with kid gloves. They have to be treated as fragile. And again, very rapidly, just over one problem, it's not a friendship anymore, right? It's just not. You can't be friends without setting those kinds of things aside, right? So again, there are different kinds of stakes for different kinds of things here. Okay, are you still ruining your life with drugs? Still ruining your life with alcohol? But like, what if the conflict is, are you still a neo-Nazi? Are you still a communist? Hunger. You don't have to ask someone else's opinion as to whether or not you should be hungry. Hunger, thirst, exhaustion, we feel these things immediately, right? You talk to someone who's a communist, you talk to someone who's a neo-Nazi, talk to someone who's living under whatever ideology that's ruining their life, even if it's just the belief in psychiatric medications. It's still a belief, it's still an ideology. The idea that depression is a chemical imbalance of the brain that can be cured with a pill, it's still an ideology. It still ruins people's lives, just like communism and Islam and so on. They have no appetite to challenge their own ignorance, right? You are in the position in giving them unwanted advice, right? Not of trying to feed them. See, on a deep level, implicitly, this is a false model, right? It's not that they are hungry for knowledge, that they are ignorant, and you are trying to feed them information. You're trying to feed them what they need to know, right? Because they only need to know it from your perspective. What you are trying to do is to create the hunger in the first place, is to create the appetite, is to create the doubt, all right? And there are these fucking ridiculous assumptions built into the worldview of someone like J.J. McCullough that just because people are older, they're going to be respected by the younger people, or they're going to know the answers to these things, or third category, they are going to be able to articulate them. There are a lot of older people who have some vague sense that communism is bad and evil and wrong and fucked up. But when they are, so let's say a 40-year-old person, when they are face to face with a passionate 21-year-old true believing communist who's all boned up on the propaganda, do they actually have the ability to, in an analytical and devastating way, challenge their views on the spot? 99.9% of them don't. Now, I'm not a master of this myself because it doesn't interest me. It's not that rewarding, but many of you have seen live streams and debates where I did this, where I actually confronted true believing communists to his face. And I've told other anecdotes in retrospect, but some of these were recorded live. You hear them in different situations, so I have some level of ability to do that, right? I live in Canada. The average person in their 40s knows about ice hockey and beer. That's what their life has revolved around. Okay. And what's on Netflix this Sunday, or what's on, like, what is the assumption that older people have some kind of wisdom to offer just because they're older? They're just impure. I don't know what planet you're living on, you know? And again, sorry, there's a third category here. Even if they do have some understanding, if they do have some wisdom, can they articulate it? And can they articulate it in a way that would actually deprogram someone who's committed to an ideology? So look, let's come back to Hamza. What would you do for this kid? Sorry, I don't even know his fucking age. Could someone in the audience Google how old is Hamza? And you're gonna have to Google it because that's his whole YouTube channel. I don't know his last name. Let's not dox Hamza, but I don't know whether he's 24 or he's 26 or he's 20. I don't even know. I don't know. I've had clips of this guy recently stating these kind of gruesome caveman aspects of his philosophy of wanting to get back to the Stone Age. Right. So, I mean, I think everyone here can see what's wrong with that. Um, I've just mentioned there are these aspects of his philosophy he's actively preaching people about nutrition and, sort of false facts of science. Again, I'm in this audience. So someone says he's 28. He looks 28. That's certainly believable. Ballpark. Totally believe he's 28. So I guess he's 28 and he's getting antsy about turning 30. 30's coming up, bro. He's tremendously self-confident. He's ebullient. He has no appetite. He has no hunger to learn that he's wrong, right? And, I'm sorry, like, in a sense, I can say, why would he? Now, I don't know. Maybe, 25. Okay. All right. 25, not 28. 25, but he looks 28. Thanks for doing the Google work for me, guys. I'll be honest with you. From a very early age, I felt like there was nothing more delightful than finding out that I was wrong. Finding out there's a whole chapter of history I knew nothing about. There's a whole perspective on the world I knew nothing about. Finding out the ways in which I was blinded by how a problem was defined or construed. Like, I'm only looking for solutions inside this box. Oh, and now I see the boxes like this. Oh, okay. I loved that. I absolutely loved finding out I was wrong. And it didn't bother me at all if the people who showed me that I was wrong, sometimes inadvertently, right? Sometimes just through their actions, if they were someone I detested or despised, or, for example, someone who had no formal education or what have you. I was always very eager to learn from illiterate rice farmers and people like that. I was eager to learn, to discover my own foolhardiness. And, yes, part of that is having a laugh at your own expense, which I do a lot of on and off camera. But that's not all there is to it. There's a lot more than just laughing, And I mean, again, I won't get into a big monologue with this, but Melissa saw this even in the writing of my most recent book, No More Manifestos. There were issues on which, I did the research. And I was like, whoa, I went into the research assuming this, and I came out assuming that. I discovered I was wrong. There are some things I've believed for many years, and wow, I didn't, yeah, what I learned quantitatively or qualitatively really changed my perspective. And, okay, I'll give you two really, really simple examples. There was just one day, and this is less than a year ago, in my opinion, when we were boiling water for pasta in the kitchen. And I said something my mother had said to me, my grandmother had said to me, people had said to me my whole life. I remember one of my ex-girlfriends said this to me too. I said, "Oh, add salt to the water. The water will boil faster when you've dissolved salt in it." And Melissa just asked me, it wasn't anything. She just said, "How do you know that? Is that really true?" And I didn't even Google. I just stopped and I put my hands on the kitchen counter. I was like, by the dead gods, it's not true, is it? This is just something my fucking mother and grandmother and all these fucking people have always said to me, and I have never bothered to stop and just even question, even visualize in my own mind, why would water boil more rapidly when you've dissolved salt in it? And I was like, oh, but I said it before I Googled it. I was like, oh my God, I'm certain it's not true. I've been living my whole life with this assumption that adding salt to water makes it boil more rapidly, and it's just not true. And I said that, and then I walked over to my computer and I Googled it. And what do you know? Surprise. It's just not true. Um, okay. My personal identity, my sense of pride, my sense of self-esteem is not attached to salt. In Hamza's case, it kind of is. Hamza is out there preaching add salt to your water. It helps you have higher testosterone levels. He's thanking salt for his muscular development and this stuff. You know, okay, well, what then? What happens when even sort of the bare facts of science do challenge your sense of pride? And what can an older person do for a younger person? Now, look, all everything we talked about in this video so far, when you say age gap relationship, this isn't what anyone thinks about, right? All that people think about is the kind of sensationalized demi-monde of older men pursuing younger women, bosses dating their secretaries, professors dating their students, this kind of thing. Age gap relationship brings with it, all these questions. Let me ask you something. Relationship doesn't mean sexual relationship. Relationship means a relationship of any kind. Do you think you could have a political movement without age gap relationships? Like, do you think a political movement can possibly be organized the way your primary school was, where everyone is only friends with people who are either like 6 months older or 6 months younger than themselves and not across intergenerational lines? No, even the most pathetic and puny political movement, like a small movement for ecology on a specific issue, a movement for saving the whales or some shit like that, a small movement like Mothers Against Drunk Driving, it absolutely must organize along intergenerational lines. You have to have older people working with younger people. And I mean, stereotypically, the older people are the ones donating the money, and the younger people are the ones doing all the work. There are a lot of tensions built into, any kind of political movement. I was reading something the other day, actually, describing the organization of a comedy troupe. So this is different from stand-up comedy. It's a group of comedians. Do you think you could have a comedy troupe without age gap relationships and people who really trust each other and really respect each other in all kinds of different positions, listen to each other's opinion and work with each other? Think about just sort of how closely people work together in making comedy. And no, you need an old man character, you need an old woman character, you need young people, you really do need people, and you need someone who does the lighting and someone who does the makeup. But just even within the people who are on stage and the people doing the writing, there's a lot that has to go back and forth across intergenerational lines, right? It's something so important, right? But in my opinion, it's so hard to do because of this unwillingness to feel like you are wrong. And, I'll come to what I think the partial solution is to this, frankly. But something I asked in this YouTube channel 100 times: do you want to be right or do you want to win? In my book, I philosophize about that at somewhat greater depth than I can in this video or than I ever have on the YouTube channel, frankly. When you're actually faced with that situation, it's really fucking hard. What if, in order to make my political movement work, I need to get along with a younger person who's using Haldol every day, who's using Haldol and Topamax and Prozac? And it's like, okay, this is my situation. If I'm working with this person in this political movement, I can't lecture them every day that they're ruining their lives and giving themselves permanent brain damage by taking these drugs. This person trusts their doctor and trusts their psychiatrist, and they're ruining their lives. And whatever the situation is, I have to just get along with this person. Okay, so do you want to be right or do you want to play to win? You know, when I'm actually in that situation in real life, I want to be right. I want to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And the stakes are pretty high. I don't want you to die, kid. You know? Okay, so let's just switch over to the other example and switch the age gap the other way. So you've got a comedy troupe. You're doing whatever combination of sketch comedy, stand-up comedy, Saturday Night Live style comedy. And there's an older person that you really rely on in whatever capacity. There's some kind of benefactor for the show, or maybe they're the best actor. Maybe they're the Emmy Screes that plays all the older roles on stage. But let's just keep it the same example. They're ruining their life. They're on Haldol and Topamax and Prozac. They're an older person. And you got to say, well, okay, you don't got to say, you got a choice. You can sweep it under the fucking rug. You can pretend it's not a problem. You can say, it's not my problem. And yeah, you know what? Haldol, this guy is not going to last 5 years, but let's make the best of it while he's here, guys. This guy's going to fade out pretty quick on these crazy pills he's taking. But we can keep it together for this season, maybe next season. Let's keep it rolling for as long as they're going to stage. Do you want to play to win, or do you want to be right? Now, look, guys, we just came through the rise and fall of the whole cryptocurrency thing. Do any of you think I'm too stupid to have made money out of crypto? Like, I made these videos saying to you loud and clear. I mean, it's a simplification to say this is a scam. But I mean, I prefer to say this is a bad idea. Here is exactly what's wrong with this idea. I made video after video saying this in a pretty nuanced way. And I knew different people directly, and then there were other people who were 6 degrees separation away who were involved in this and were risking their money and so on. And you can imagine the way in which I was the voice of caution and warning and what have you. So what? That's real money. Let's just say I could have 10x'd my money fucking around with crypto. I could have exploited my own audience too. There are channels way smaller than mine that made a ton of money just exploiting their audience, saying, "Hey guys, I'm jumping on this investment thing." You can write the script for what would have happened, and when I would have made money and you wouldn't have. Brian Turner, right? Sorry, if you look up the name, probably just look up the name Brian. I think he's the only guy named Brian I've criticized on my channel. But I took on Brian Turner on this, and these people are shameless. But Brian Turner, especially his finance channel, is a very small audience. It's a smaller audience than I have, but he did this anyway. Okay, well, I'm just saying, there are stakes for me too. And it's one thing to say, like, you're in a civil war and you say, look, this is war. I want to win. We're playing to win. I don't want to be right. I want to be on the winning side. And here's how we're going to do it. So, I mean, right now in Ukraine, if you want to go join the army and fight in Ukraine, guess what? You're going to be working with a bunch of guys who are neo-Nazis. Do you want to be right, or do you want to fight this war and possibly win this war? Possibly. Might not be up to you. It might be out of your control with you. Right? Guess what? You can go to Virginia, United States of America, sign up to join the army in Virginia. I guarantee there are going to be some guys who are neo-Nazis on that army base. There are. You are going to be in service to us. And you got to ask yourself, do you want to be right, or do you want to win? Do you want to ruin your military career by getting into fistfights with these Nazis on this military base, or do you want to just get along? You just want to. It's hard. I mean, like, really face to face, really dealing with stuff's hard. And again, I think this is why I react so negatively to JJ McCullough presenting. I mean, it's a dichotomy. It's kind of a fair enough dichotomy. On the one hand, the image of kids, 19, 20, 21, sitting alone with Discord and 4chan and YouTube, sitting alone on the internet. And then on the other side of the dichotomy, this better world in which older, wiser people reach out to them and befriend them and integrate them into a more sophisticated, nuanced view of political reality. Like, the assumption being these older people have that to offer, that they can articulate that, and that they can, frankly, exercise a kind of coercion to force these kids out of the ideology they're committed to, or just the pastime they're committed to, just the fatuous enjoyment of their free time that they're committed to, because it may not be a lot more to them than that. But, again, sorry, this may seem like a strange contrast to you guys, but please try to take this seriously. And I know I haven't talked a lot about sex in this video for a change. Sex is barely mentioned. But this applies to your sex life as well, whether you're sleeping with someone older than yourself or someone, younger than yourself. When I was doing humanitarian work in Laos and Cambodia, I would sit down with white people all the time. This included, like, to give an example, this included a guy who was a surgeon doing emergency surgery. He was actually working in Myanmar. But anyway, Laos, Cambodia, this third world. But all kinds of different conversations with white people. So some of them doing humanitarian work as clear cut as surgery or handing out sacks of rice to starving people. But a lot of the humanitarian work is more nuanced and debatable. Like, I knew a guy who was doing consultations on how to preserve elephant habitat. So he was some kind of, I think his university was in geography. It was kind of ecology, and it's complex. But whatever. People working in rubber plantations, electricity generation, water purification. The white people doing all these different jobs under some humanitarian banner or another. And of course, when you sit down and talk to these white people, what they say is, the indigenous people here, they just won't listen. They just won't listen to me. They just won't do what I say. They're basically, I can't coerce these people. Like, they're basically saying, I know better than them. I'm more intelligent than them. I'm more wise than them. I'm more highly educated. I'm more intellectual. I know the solution to their problems, and I'm telling them, but they won't listen, or they won't do it, or they won't follow through, or whatever. So you can imagine. And you know what I said back to them every time? Nobody invited you to come here. None of these people paid admission to get a ticket and sit down in a fucking theater and listen to your lecture. Nobody. Zero. Like, especially in Laos, people are very polite to your face. Cambodia, not so much. Cambodia is a contrast. But like, in Laos, if you just walk up to people and start lecturing them about water purification, you'd be amazed how nice people are to you. You know what I mean? They're nice to you. But like, homeboy, nobody fucking invited you here. It doesn't even matter. You're an anthropologist or something. Nobody invited you to come here and analyze their fucking culture and write your anthropology paper. You came. You are forcing yourself in the situation. You are offering advice nobody wants to hear. Okay, well, you know what? Women find me handsome. I don't fucking know why. I don't need to know why. I kid you. Melissa sees this all the fucking time. I would have no problem getting a new girlfriend who's 21 years old. It'll be honest, the easiest way for me to do it would just be to lie and pretend Melissa doesn't exist. Finding a 21-year-old who wants to be in some kind of crazy triangular relationship is another story. That's such another video. But let's just say I find it in my black heart to create a new dating profile and pretend I'm single, and I get into a relationship with a 21-year-old girl. Girl. This is normal English now. I used to fight against it. I used to insist on saying woman. Gigi McCullough refers to this 21-year-old as a boy and a kid. People refer to a 21-year-old woman as a girl. We're infantilizing people into their 20s. What, you could join the army still at 16, right? 21 is a boy, 21 is a girl. That's what's normal in the English language now, including rap music and love songs and all this shit, right? Okay. So this chick, let's just assume she meets me through an app, but it would be the same. I'm pretty sure I could get laid at that bookstore. I'm pretty sure if I just pretend to be single in the reference section, I can pick up someone 20 years younger than me. Okay. I'm 44, so that's legal. So 20 years younger than me is 24. Okay. So whatever, 24-year-old. You know what? Okay. So this is really like going to do humanitarian work in Laos and Cambodia. And it's fucked up, but stick with me here. I got all this life advice for this girl. I'm telling her exactly what she needs to hear, whether it's about her education or her job or her drug habit or her drinking alcohol or her eating meat, her taking Prozac or taking whatever the fuck it is, right? I'm so wise and intelligent and experienced. I have all this fucking advice. Well, guess what? Even if she literally sucks my dick and takes it up the ass for me, she did not buy a fucking ticket to this morality lecture. She may be completely in love with me, but you know what? This is not what she signed up for. She's sucking my dick because she's attracted to me. She's taking up the ass because she loves me. She wants to have sex with me. She doesn't want to be right. She wants to make her own mistakes. She wants to at least have her own opinions, right? Make her own decisions in life. She is 100% within her rights, even in the most intimate kind of sexual relationship imaginable, to say, look, you are some guy I met at the bookstore, or you are some guy I clicked on with this fucking app, okay? And I ain't trying to hear it. Your fucking story about what you did in Cambodia, or your scientific hypothesis about the value of salt in your diet, whatever the issue is, because again, you could be with a young woman who believes all the same crazy shit Hamza believes. Your incredibly well-informed opinion about Prozac, fuck you. I'm okay. My point is this: even in the most intimate and loving kind of friendship imaginable, right? Being right, being better informed, being correct, but being wise, what have you. It has no coercive power over the other person. And if you really search your heart of hearts and think about it, if you think about if you were in that person's position, how would you feel? How would you regard it? Again, maybe you're an exception. I mean, I think I am an exception. I think psychologically I'm a somewhat abnormal person in a number of ways. And abnormal doesn't mean I'm better than other people. It just means abnormal. In some ways, I'm just a very unusual person. And I didn't choose this. I really didn't choose to be eccentric, but I didn't choose to be born in this culture either. I didn't choose what's normal and what's abnormal in this cultural context. That's not my choice either. But like when I'm actually there on the street in Laos, or I'm actually there on the farm in Laos, I'm not even going to say in the jungle. There's no jungle left. I was in some of the last jungle, whatever. Jungles all cut down. When you are there, I really fucking relate to and sympathize with the farmer who is standing there saying, white man, I really did not invite you to come here and tell me how to run my farm. You know what? And you got this lofty idea about elephant habitat and the tigers going extinct. And look, you realize what team I'm on here. I was heartbroken by seeing the tigers going extinct. I was heartbroken by seeing wild pangolins getting chopped up and massacred. Pangolins that were on the endangered species list at that time. Giant pythons. It's terrible. You're seeing the death of the last wild elephants, last wild tigers. Yeah, I know what team I'm on. I'm not lying to you and saying I'm on this farmer's side, this farmer who just selfishly wants to make a few bucks chopping in the forest and farming rice or whatever it is he farms for that year. I'm not. I have my own bias. I have my own agenda. I'd prefer the elephants to survive rather than go extinct, etc. But I still get it from his perspective. He didn't buy a ticket to hear your fucking morality lecture. He didn't sign up to hear your ecological opinion. You bought this airplane ticket. You came here. Your idea of charity is shoving your opinion down his mouth. All right. So look, topic for another video, and also topic I discuss in all my books. How do you create the hunger? How do you create the appetite? How do you create the curiosity? How do you create the doubt so that the farmer is coming to you, or so that the 21-year-old girl you're sleeping with is coming to you, so that people who are in these political ideologies are coming to you? It's a complex question. It's a complex answer, where you don't look at it as force feeding the other people, but where you recognize they first have to be hungry. They first have to have doubt. They first have to have curiosity and so on. And, I would say also it helps. Ultimately, it helps if they have ambition. Ambition is even better, because, again, take the example of a kid who knows what it's like to stand on the street corner holding a sign and chant political slogans again and again and again. After just a few weeks, they realize this is going nowhere. After a few months, after a few years, ambition alone can make them hungry, can make them curious, can make them doubt the ideology that's been inculcated into them, right? But, long story short, I mean, I can say go read my book, but whatever. If you look at any of the videos on this channel, that's what they're all trying to do. And like even a comedy rap song, even the comedy videos I've made about transgender issues, which are comedy, that they're not a morality lecture about transgender issues, right? But think about what I'm trying to do with the audience. I'm trying to get you to doubt things that you wish could be certain, right? I'm trying to get you down. I'm trying to get you to question. I'm trying to get you to be hungry. So there's a lot of that that's gone on this channel. And yeah, I'll be honest with you, it's fundamentally easier to do that in a YouTube channel than it is to do it face to face in friendship with a 21-year-old or with a 41-year-old or a 51-year-old because you clicked on the video. You actually bought the ticket, to hear this lecture. I'm going to read you a short passage. I thought I'd start with this, but it looks like I'm ending with it. From our Lord and Savior Stendhal, the Chartreuse de Parma. So this is a situation in which an older man, much older man, is giving advice to a younger man before he starts attending university. As you're going to hear, the assumed value of the university education in this cultural context is that he'll go on to get a job in the Catholic Church somewhere. But interestingly, this young man is not interested in living in celibacy. But you may not know there are some forms of employment at the Catholic Church where you are not required to live in celibacy. So that's another aspect of what's going on here. So this is the advice given to a young man about how he should conduct himself in university. Believe what you are taught or not, but never offer any objection. Imagine that you are being taught the rules of a game of whist. What objections could you possibly have to the rules of whist? I told the Count that you were a believer, and he is pleased with that fact. It is useful in this world and in the next. But if you are a believer, do not fall into the vulgarity of speaking with horror of Voltaire, Diderot, and all those harebrained Frenchmen who have paved the way to a government of two chambers. Let these names rarely come to your lips, but when you must, speak of these gentlemen with a calm irony. They have long since been refuted, and their attacks are not of any importance. Believe blindly everything you are told at the academy. And notice the contrast. Just a moment ago, she was saying, whether or not you believe it doesn't matter. It's just like the rules of a game of cards. It's just like the rules of poker. It doesn't matter if you believe it or not. These are the rules of the game. There's a shift here. Believe blindly everything you are told at the academy. Realize that there are people keeping careful account of your slightest objections. You will be forgiven some minor amorous intrigue if it is properly conducted, but not a doubt. Now, age suppresses intrigue and increases doubt. Act on this. Can I skip ahead here a bit? The Count's second suggestion is this. If there should occur to you some brilliant reasoning, a victorious retort which would change the course of the conversation, do not yield to the temptation to shine. Hold your tongue. Intelligent people will see the wit in your eyes, and there will be plenty of time to be witty later when you are a bishop. So, okay. I have been in this situation myself as a student, and I have been in this situation when advising younger men about being a student. And this comes back to you in such a weird way, this whole thing of, do you want to be right or do you want to win? And one of the things I try to counsel younger men on is you have to conduct yourself in the university in a way where you are not creating more work for your professor. The worst thing you can possibly do is go up to your professor and say, yeah, I want an exception to be made in my case. I don't want to write an essay about this. I want to write an essay about that. I don't want to do this research. I want to do that research. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter how right you are. You're asking the professor to teach an extra course for you, where you are the only student and they get paid nothing. Now, I actually do have the experience of a professor teaching an extra course for me. I've had that happen. I've had professors offer that to me, where you do a separate independent study course, where you write a separate. I've had all kinds of exceptions to the rules made for me by professors. And even then, I normally say, look, are you sure you want to do this? Like, this is going to be, I can just silently get along with the rest of the class. And as ebullient and hard to ignore a character as I am, when I was at the University of Victoria, I made every effort to silently conform to class. And, you know, I've had a professor stand at the front of the class and make errors about Buddhism that are just as crude and ridiculous as someone who doesn't understand the difference between Santa Claus and Jesus Christ. Like they're making errors on that level, making errors that just reading the Wikipedia article would solve. I've had professors saying things about Confucius, about Islam, about all manner of things. And I really understand that my role is not to interrupt the professor and is not to pwn the professor, is not to upstage the professor, although I can. And in some classes, that's not something I can do every week. It's something I can do like every 10 minutes of the lecture. There are so many subjects on which I'm better informed than the professor. Now, this is talking about like Asian studies, like, this is exactly what my field expertise. Obviously, if I took a course on the history of Jamaica, wouldn't be true. I don't know that much about the history of Jamaica. Maybe once in a while I'll be like, professor, is that quite right? I know the agony of being right when the professor is wrong. And I know the discipline of holding your tongue and having to really understand that this is a game of whist, this is a game of poker. You know, and that, frankly, if you want to be right, come on YouTube and be right. If you want to show people how brilliant you are, again, go do stand-up comedy, show people how brilliant you are, but when you're in the classroom with the professor, um, frankly, even if you hate the professor, your first duty is to make the professor's life easier and not harder. You can't expect the professor to do more work to satisfy you, even if you're right and the professor is wrong. And I would say the most excruciating situations were exactly when the professors were demanding and inviting our participation. And and then I do participate. Again, I mean, unless I actually remain silent when you're actually being asked to speak by the professor, being asked to step forward. Where basically my positive role in the classroom, it's brought into a kind of contradiction with itself. Okay, well, you know what? Like, and sorry, I just want to say, I think I haven't told this anecdote before. If anyone in the audience has heard this anecdote before, you can tell me. In terms of how thin the line is, where you are making more work for the professor and you're kicked out of the program, your life is ruined, game over, sudden death. In terms of how thin that line is, in the year 2023, I knew a nice Chinese woman, and she was several years older than a normal university student. I don't know her exact age. And she wanted to have a university degree in chemistry. Her whole career was supposed to be in biology, chemistry, organic chemistry, that kind of thing. And she had a female professor who spoke English very rapidly. And this is a student whose first language is Chinese, is a citizen of China, is born and raised in China. English is very much second language. That's one of the reasons why she's coming to get this degree, older than the other students. She's had a few years to build up her ability in English. And the professor is referring to the pieces of equipment, like the beakers and the test tubes and different things, very rapidly and in a confusing way. And, it's believable. Like, she's not using the word beaker consistently. Like, what is a beaker and what is a tube and what have you. And this Chinese student is just asking, look, I'm sorry, so after class, can you go through this with me? I've got to write down. She's got to figure out what the Chinese terms are that correspond to English. I'm sorry, like you say, put this in the beaker or put the beaker over the flame or whatever. And I don't know what you mean because I don't really and obviously there's someone who has a mobile phone and access to the internet. but she's not able, Googling around, to find terms that actually match the way the professor is using them. However, the professor is using this jargon. The professor may just be wrong, but the professor is probably just being sloppy. And she's like, look, I can't follow these instructions because I don't know the denotation of these terms. And the professor told the student, if you ever ask me again, if you ever raise your hand and interrupt class again, if you ask for guidance on this or ask me to do this or tell you what is a beaker and what is a test tube, you will be charged with harassment and you'll be kicked out of my course. And obviously, this was like the necessary first year course dealing with lab methods for chemistry. So this is how little tolerance, how little helpfulness, how little love and care and concern a student can get from a professor in the 21st century. And it completely ruined the student's life. So when I knew her, and I mean, her parents in China, God knows how much money they had paid, because to send your child to university in Canada, if you were a Chinese person, is a huge amount of money. And obviously they were expecting she was going to go on to some high paid career in chemistry as a chemical engineer or something like that. You know, well, when I met her, she was getting a degree in Chinese literature. You know, her first language is Chinese because she was forced to drop out of chemistry. She didn't know what to do. She didn't want to humiliate her parents and waste all this money. So she got a totally different, totally useless, totally dead degree in a totally unrelated subject. Okay. So, all right. Okay. You think it's easy for either party, right? So if I'm the guy in his 40s and I have a friend who's 21, so even for something this wholesome, now we're not dealing with communism, we're not dealing with Nazism, we're not dealing with sex, we're not dealing with Prozac or Haldol or marijuana or alcohol or meat versus a vegetarian diet, anything like that. Okay, we're not dealing with any of those issues here. Okay, but just to counsel someone about exactly what they need to do to survive in university, right? And really, in a sense, how to develop intellectually despite the university system while succeeding in the university system. Like where you really said, well, yeah, look, if this is your interest, this is your research interest, don't even mention it to the professor. The professor is teaching a class on this subject in this way. If you don't want to get in line, don't take that class, take a different class. But no, you can't force the professor to change what they're teaching to reflect your research interests or reflect the fact that the professor is a complete imbecile. Or the complete is wrong, what have you. There are all kinds of things that may be wrong with the professor and what they're teaching. But that's not your job and that's not the professor's job. Here's how you have to conduct yourself. Even with this kind of conflict between the generations, right? Do you think you can have that phone call? Like you think you think you can be friends? You think they're going to take you out to lunch? You think they're going to take you out to dinner? Like you think just the continuation of the friendship is possible? Or every time you meet up or every time you talk over the phone or Skype, it's like, oh, I told you exactly what to do and what not to do. And I told you what was going to happen if you did this thing you've done before. And there's, and look, the reason why it's so painful. So again, you guys don't know this book that well. Everyone involved in this story is an atheist. And they're also libertines. Like the woman giving the advice to the younger man, she herself sleeps around and is an atheist and believes in democracy, doesn't believe in God or the Bible or monarchy or what have you. And the count who's alluded to is also an atheist and a libertine and supported the French Revolution and what have you. None of them are pious Catholics, but it's like, look, if you want to get through this deeply Catholic university, here's the attitude you have to take toward the game being played, and here's how you have to play the game. And I just think it's very telling that he advised him specifically, when you think of a witty reply, when you think of a retort, when you think of something you could say that's going to humiliate your professor, just don't say it at all. Just smile and people around you will see the shining in your eyes. Save it for later. Again, in this day and age, I could say, hey, if you've got something so intelligent to say, you can say it on YouTube. don't say it to your professors at all. Okay, so guys, let's just come back briefly to this thing with JJ. Start the video. And I'm sorry, I do actually have more to say. So, babe, I don't know if you have more to say too. Okay, I'll also hold on. I'll open it up to comments. I'll read your comments and reply. I'll let Melissa comment and reply. But just to wrap up on JJ, and unfortunately, it's not the only locus here I really want to deal with. What if we started this discussion not by thinking about what you should do, but about what you can do, right? This is the sense in which what JJ says is idealistic. What if we started with an understanding of the difference you can make and the difference you can't make? And probably a lot of you guys have been in the situation where, let's say you have a friend who's just fat and trying to lose weight, and you say to him, look, if you don't completely stop drinking beer, I can't help you. Like, I know how much beer you drink. There's no point. I'm not going to counsel you and coach you and help you because just the total amount of calories you're getting from beer is so enormous. Like, dude, it's pointless. Like, whatever you change, if you changed to eating broccoli or something, I'm sorry, but your alcoholism is tied to why you're fat, and it's tied to all your other problems in life. Why you're doing badly at work, why you're doing bad with your girlfriend. All I have to say to you is that you got to quit drinking beer. And I can't help you. Like, I think you guys can imagine where you're in those situations where every fucking conversation begins and ends with saying, I can't help you. I know what you need to do. I understand exactly what you need to understand. I can't understand it for you. I have the will, I have the desire and the motivation that you need to have to solve your problem, but I can't do it for you. You know what I mean? There is nothing I can do. And then beyond that, there's the issue of compulsion. I can't compel you, So I think that's the tragedy of it. And again, I don't have to repeat these examples. What if I was friends with Jordan Peterson? Just as an example, what if Jordan Peterson just by happenstance, and we're both from Toronto originally, right? Well, okay. He lived for many, many years in Toronto. I lived for many years in Toronto. Probably neither of us are really from Toronto, but whatever. He used to be at University of Toronto and so on, right? Different world. I could have known him and stayed in touch with him. We could have had family friends in common or something. But he and I physically were on the same piece of land in Toronto. Melissa's seen the geography. I don't know, whatever. We were moving in the same geography for many years, moving around the same few blocks of the city. Okay, what if I know Jordan Peterson, right? Just think about it. The guy's a benzodiazepine addict. I can't help you. Jordan, just again, it can be trying to counsel someone who's older. It can be trying to counsel someone who's younger. And the sad fact is what most people do is retreat into isolation because fundamentally they do not like the feeling of being wrong. They do not like the feeling of being in the wrong. We've got some more comments coming in, which is great. It says good time. I will scroll back and read some comments if I've missed them. But babe, if you got nothing to say, you can say nothing. But I imagine there might be some things. Yeah, sure, fine. Yeah. I will back up, I think. No, okay, I'll go this way. Good. Yeah.
Okay. Earlier today, I was listening to a world news podcast, and there was a story about a number of victims of a Christian cult in Kenya, and they had been influenced to starve themselves in order to go to heaven. And it was rather moving to hear that they tried to administer humanitarian aid to these people who were starving themselves to death. And there were a number that refused. They would close their mouth shut and refuse any food. So, it's just interesting that I heard that today. And then you had this discussion about the hunger to learn. And I was just thinking that throughout. So, yeah, I was kind of struck by that, both, in actuality, this real instance of that happening, but also psychologically, how do you get somebody to have the hunger for knowing that they're wrong and, thinking differently.
We haven't talked at all about the scenario in which the person giving advice turns out to be wrong and then doesn't have to deal with any of the consequences, right? So I just say that's another thing. And certainly I have received advice from older people that turned out to be totally wrong, whether it was just false or if that was true 30 years ago and it's not true now, whatever the story was. But guess what? It's an overused phrase now, but in economics, they have no skin in the game. They're not taking any risk. I'm out here taking all the risks. So ultimately, it's my decision because I got to deal with the consequences, right? I mean, I think every single example we've given here, like, my advice is don't drink alcohol, be sober. Well, there's no real risk there that my advice is wrong. It's not like, oh, fuck, now I've been sober for the last 5 years and I have these terrible consequences. But a lot of the advice older people give you can have really negative consequences for you and not for them. And now what? And now what's going to happen with our so-called friendship? I think fundamentally, it's taboo to have age gap relationships of any kind because people don't want to think about the risk that results in the power imbalance, and I remember Vegan Cheetah saying this. So if you guys don't remember, Vegan Cheetah used to be a famous YouTuber. He's disappeared for a long, long time now, due to his drug addiction and so on. I remember he said that because he had been a drug addict for so many years, he was really incredibly immature and he was at a very low level of education. So he felt he could only date much younger women because women the same age as himself were so much more advanced intellectually and so much more, mature and what have you. Like both of these things are tragic. You have a relationship, whether it's a sexual relationship or not, just a friendship or colleagueship, what have you. You can have a relationship where the older person really is wiser and they're right 90% of the time, or they may be right 95% of the time. And then there's something kind of denigrating and resented for the person in the friendship or the relationship that gets to be wrong again and again and again. Right. But, we have this fine old saying in England, there is no fool like an old fool. You can be an idiot at any age. You can be ignorant at any age. You can be wrong at any age. You can have relationships with an age gap where the older person is wrong just as often as the younger, because they're a fool or they're a drug addict or an alcoholic or whatever. They've wasted their life playing video games and watching sports on TV. And that's tragic in a different way, Yeah. So look, I reached out to this guy who was another YouTube channel talking about atheism, and his channel is The Unrepentant Atheist. So I've got a link to that. You can click on his name or whatever. He has a very simple, spare format of just kind of news commentary within atheism. And we'll see. Maybe he's going somewhere with it. Maybe he's not. Where he goes from here, I don't know. But currently, it's a very dry, very spare format. There are no puppets. There's no music. There's no dancing. No special effects. And, the guy sent me a bunch of insulting comments just on YouTube that I deleted. They were genuinely insulting. And I was busy at the time, didn't have time to reach out to him. But then I did reach out to him. And unlike 1,000 other attempts at reaching out to somebody I've had, he really responded in a sincere and mature and interested and interesting way. And we had a really productive conversation as a result. I would guess that this guy is 20 years older than I am, I would guess. So let's say I'm 44 and he's 64. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Maybe he's 54 and I'm way off here. I'm looking at a pretty small image of him on YouTube, and guessing people's age is not my forte in any case. Okay, this guy in many ways is my ideological enemy, by the way. We don't have a lot in common, which is cool. It's really great to be friends with someone we don't like. Let's say he's 20 years older than me. He probably, in many ways, has more experience in life than I do. Have you guys seen my employment history? I've never driven a car. Like there are a lot of ways in which I'm lacking experience in life. But that's a conversation that has to start off with him as a guy 20 years older than me, kind of admitting that he's in the wrong and saying, hey, look, I'm sorry. I lost my temper and sent you these angry comments. And in terms of what it is we're talking about, again, I'm not an expert on all issues. I'm really not. But we're talking about a lot of things where I happen to really be a smart aleck, where I happen to be extremely well informed, like the history of the vegan movement, like, frankly, trivial controversies within atheism on YouTube. We happen to be talking about things that are kind of my forte, whether they're trivial or profound. And it's really worthwhile for me to sit here and reflect and think about all the other men who were older than me in the last 10 years who could never even just have this conversation with me. And again, if this guy has no other redeeming qualities, he's got one, right, that really matters. Like, well, for one thing, he's capable of being really honest, right? But the other thing that's going on here is he's just not intimidated by, he's just not afraid of, being wrong, the feeling of being wrong. And so what? Like, can't we all get over it? So fundamentally, the guy sent me some insulting YouTube comments. He was actually very upset. This is the reason why he sent me these insults, because in a video where I was ridiculing Cosmic Skeptic is another YouTuber, this video where I was criticizing and ridiculing him and using puppets and teddy bears and a lot of humor, was obviously a comedy video. I said that Cosmic Skeptic's major was divinity rather than theology. This is the distinction. And at the moment, who knows why? He was really angry about that. He felt I was really misleading my audience because I said he majored in divinity instead of saying he majored in theology. Okay, so guys, if English is your second language, they're very close in meaning. The study of divinity, the study of theology, they are very close in meaning. And I said one and not the other. And that's the kind of thing where you're just going to say, look, even if I'm wrong, like, it's a YouTube video, bro. It's a convict. Come on, it's such a big deal. And again, think about the last 10 years. How many people that I've spoke to at any age, in any position, were able to shrug their shoulders and go, yeah, you're right. I guess, yeah, I got upset about this and it's not that big a deal. And something you said later, and I said, yeah, it's a comedy video, and, never let the facts get in the way of a good joke. Yeah, you got a point. I got upset. I made a big deal over something. It's not, doesn't really matter. Like, even if you're wrong, like I was wrong to say divinity instead of theology, who cares? I really got to sit back and on this. And again, I'm being real with you. In my experience, it's the same with people at age 16 and at age 56. My experience with all human beings on planet Earth, in all cultures, Japanese, Chinese, Thai, Cambodian, Laotian, British, French, German, like globally across all cultures, is that you have some kind of trivial confrontation with somebody with some of this, and they will hate you forever. They will hate you until the day that you die. And with the internet being what it is, they resurface every so often on Instagram or on YouTube or on Tumblr, and they let you know, they let you know that they're still out to get you, that they still remember, they still hate you. And it never goes away. And it never, look, I could give a ton of examples right now. So if you guys don't know the story of Socrates, so no typo, Socrates is one person, Socrates is another, her reason for hating me was that I set out, "You're never going to catch me wearing a Dungeons and Dragons t-shirt." That was the joke or the comment. "You're never going to catch me wearing a Dungeons and Dragons t-shirt." And, oh my God. So this is a 10-year vendetta. And you can look up what Socrates has done with their life since then, But there were other people. I remember other vegans at that time. There was one who had a website that was just devoted to vegan activism. And at one point, she changed the website so that it had all this crap about this video game she was playing. So the whole website is like the vegan stuff is still there, but it's now. And I wrote to her and I said, "Look, I'm just really surprised you did this. Like, you used to have a really serious vegan website, and now it's kind of this weird kiddie stuff. Like playing video games is just a waste of time. Why would you want to make your primary identity being a gamer? And then, like before, it was this kind of serious vegan website." And obviously, I'm in a I don't know, at least a curious way. I was being on level. It wasn't insulting or something. And she responded to this by saying, "I can't believe you're against gaming. You're against, being a, whatever, not even a professional video gamer, but making video games the main thing in your life and your primary identity. And I'll hate you forever and ever for this." And again, naturally, I then didn't hear from her for a year or a year and a half or something. But I did hear from her again, whatever it was, year and a half later. And she still hated me and she's still out to get me, for this, from my perspective, well-intentioned comment. Like, look, there's more to life than video games. Why would you want to make this, video games? So yeah, I know these are down at the picayune end of the spectrum. But yeah, this is not a footnote in my life from autobiography. This is our primary experience. I'm saying our because I mean Melissa and I. When you go through kind of stumbling block by stumbling block. So like some people hate me because I'm sober and I just openly say drinking alcohol causes brain damage. I cannot tell you how many people hate me because I'm willing to say marijuana causes brain damage. All my life, this is such an unbelievable recurring theme. And people straight up say to you, they will hate you and never forgive you the rest of their life. They believe in, for real. They believe in like the ideology of marijuana that way. And they attribute to marijuana saved them and made their life better. All the same shit that exists for antidepressant drugs. When you go through kind of stumbling block by stumbling block. Now, look, I can't tell you that I'd have more friends or more colleagues if I were a communist instead of an anti-communist. It's not an option for me. I mean, you've seen this. What a huge percentage of people have interacted with have been communists or have been so far left wing that they're kind of communist -1. They're just short of being communists. And again, I don't think those people refuse to talk to me because I'm anti-communist. I think they refuse to talk to me because they feel bad about themselves. They hate the feeling of being wrong. And sorry, let's just take a step beyond communism. So, I mean, I know you guys might, but guys, 2023, it's the scale of communism. It's mind-blowing. Communism made this huge comeback, and a lot of the worst people in the world are communists now. It's really a tremendously powerful, popular philosophy, which is terrible. But that is the truth. I mean, anti-Semitism is very popular too. What can I tell you? In terms of what are currently prevalent and influential ideas. But like apart from communism, like apart from something that can clearly be defined as an ideology like that, do you know how many people hate me and will never speak to me again just because of what I've said about petting zoos and animal rescue and pet ownership and scientific testing on animals? And some of these people made videos where you could see the look in their eye, and you could see them trembling with rage and hatred. Some people just write to me, obviously, but in a few cases, you should see this. People who will hate me intensely until, the day I die for that. So, my point is, like, category by category, step by step, most of the people and I'm saying we intentionally, for Melissa and I both, most of the people we could be friends with do not feel comfortable talking to us, do not feel comfortable being in the same room with us because of really simple issues like this. And by the way, these are issues about which there is an objective right and wrong. Like they're not matters of opinion. They're not matters of taste. It's not like we have different taste in music or different style of clothing. And, I mean, Melissa and I both, we really have this in common. we have ended up being isolated and admired. I mean, I can't tell you how many people tell me that I'm admirable for all kinds, whether it's the humanitarian work in Cambodia or the veganism or the study of languages or just how well informed, how learned I am about Aristotle or something. There are people who admire me for all kinds of different reasons. So yeah, you're admirable. And they want to stay as far away from me as possible because I make them feel bad about themselves. Now, actually, I can come back to the example of that communist guy I had this very witty face-to-face discussion with. So if you guys didn't hear it, it was an hour ago or something. This got mentioned. But it was very strange to me. So I think he said he was 38. Okay, so this guy's 38 years old. I'm 44. It was very strange to me that he said, you're humiliating me, right? He said that repeatedly. He just stood there and he said, you're humiliating me. Did he say you're ridiculing me too? I think he said. And again, if you were a 16-year-old saying, it just blew my mind that this grown man is standing there holding a beer at a party saying, you're humiliating me, you're ridiculing me in front of other people. And I'm not. I'm just right. And he's wrong. And I'm better informed than him. I'm also smarter than him. Sorry. Do you not know what it's like to talk to someone who is smarter than you, better informed about the particular topic, older than you, wiser than you, And something he also said repeatedly, which probably just reflects the company he normally keeps, at several different points, he said to me, he was kind of marveling. He said, how can you be so confident? How can you be so sure about that? And we were just talking about like facts of history and politics. We weren't, we weren't talking about our sex lives or something where there's really, dealing with nebulous and uncertain concepts. And one of the things I said to him, and I said in this kind of jokey way, I said, well, when you get to be my age, you might feel pretty confident about these things too. You might feel, you've done the research, you know what it is. And yeah, and every time he said, I'm 38. Again, he was kind of hurt by that I was just indicating, look, I'm older than you, Yeah. So you guys can see there's a certain level of self-criticism woven into this. And again, look, I mean, I can go on and on because this stuff really does interest me. If you look at the history of my YouTube channel, one of the big differences between season 1 and season 2 is exactly my optimism and my lack of optimism of exactly these kinds of things. When I was at the University of Victoria, studying the politics of Asia, but really China and Japan. Their definition of Asia is China and Japan, nothing else. So politics and history of China and Japan. I completely assumed I was going to meet other intellectuals who would sit down with me on camera and record YouTube videos. I didn't think I was going to be working alone. So, it's going to be a whole place full of people who are hardworking, motivated scholars of political history of China and Japan. We're going to have a lot to talk about. We're going to do videos together. No. Why do you think those people didn't want to be on camera with me? Well, in many cases, I can tell you what they told me. Because Melissa's even been there. People say to me straight to my face, no, I wouldn't want to be in a video with you because I will look stupid. I will feel stupid sitting next to you all the time. People say that to me, And look, there's a real question there. How are you going to grow? If you are, on the one hand, you're not willing to learn from my experience. On the other hand, you're not willing to go out and make your own mistakes, fall on your face, look stupid, feel stupid. It's neither. So you're locked into, it's just you alone with Instagram, with YouTube, with Discord. You're alone in your own tunnel this way. And sorry. Again, I'm saying all these things because frankly, I think every single person in the audience already knows what I'm talking about. I don't think I have to further elaborate the psychological problem I'm talking about here. And in my opinion, right now, it's at epidemic levels across all cultures for the whole globe. This is a problem in Japan. It's a problem in South Korea. It's a problem everywhere that I know of. If it's not a problem in Africa, great. If someone is watching from Uganda and wants to tell me that. But every part of the world in many different cultures and languages that I've had contact with. Oh, right. So look, let's just get back to this. The guy I mentioned, this much older guy with his own YouTube channel talking about atheism. Okay. So you realize I have been doing this shit on the internet for more than 10 years. This is the only advocate for atheism who has talked to me. Now, I'm using the word talk as something separate from insulted me. I do have videos where I'm showing screenshots of what these people say to me. I do have like examples of other YouTubers and podcasters who, said terrible, insulting, hurtful things to me, but just to fucking talk to me. At one point in the conversation, I sent him my resume, I sent him my CV, which, has a lot of weird stuff in it. Used to live in Cambodia, used to live in Laos, used to study these languages. That's what my resume says. He actually read my resume. He actually just looked at how many YouTube videos I had and kind of glanced at what are the topics. He is the only person in 10 years in this category, atheism, atheist activist, secular activist, who did that ever. And I wrote to everybody and I reached out to everybody, as you know, including Jacqueline Glenn, including the Amazing Atheist, but including the more formal kind of interview-based podcast. And for all these people, I had something very obvious to offer. Do you think they talk to a lot of scholars of Buddhism who can read the Pali Canon, right? So this is the only guy. This is the first exception to the rule after 10 years. Now, look, again, I've had enough videos talking about this lately. If you guys don't already know, you can go watch other videos that exist. I'm not lonely, but I am alone. Like when Melissa and I went to Paris, we were shocked nobody wanted to meet up with us. It's just Paris is a major city. My YouTube channel was getting more than 1 million views a year at that time, 1 million or 1.5 million that year. I don't remember, but something like that. My YouTube channel was popping. I'm getting emails and messages from all kinds of different people today. Everything's going great. And you think, okay, hey, we made the announcement. Hey, we're going to be in Paris on these dates. Who wants to know? Nobody, And it's only a slight simplification to say that when we went to New York City, nobody wanted to meet up with us. But, the other side of that is, of course, there's nobody I wanted to meet up with either, But, again, this is one of the differences between season 1 and season 2 is that you just adjust to living with the reality of anything you want to accomplish. It's terrible. I mean, like, if you're a painter, you can work alone with the canvas. Almost every other art form requires, collaboration. And, again, Melissa and I, we are not lonely, but we are alone. And, we're talking about making this huge sacrifice to leave Canada and relocate to Los Angeles. We could change our minds. We could relocate to New York. We could locate to Washington, D.C. I think those are about the only options that are tempting for the United States. Yeah, well, guess what? You can make all those sacrifices and you can be totally fucking alone in Los Angeles. Most people are. You can be living in Los Angeles and it's a 1-hour drive to anything. It's just a very spread out city. And nobody wants to make a 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour drive to see you. To use my most overused phrase, you can love the streets, they won't love you back. When I decided to sacrifice all these years to being a leader and a critic and commentator on the vegan movement, do you think I thought at the end of that process I would have nobody? I would have nobody and be going nowhere? Never occurred to me. I mean, of course, I didn't think I was going to have 100 friends and colleagues, 5, 10, 15, 50, whatever. I would know some dozens of people who were interested in such major, obvious questions as, the fate of the planet Earth and shit, and what's going to happen to the vegan movement in the next 5 years and how are we going to make it happen? And I know nobody. So you guys know, in the past, I've talked to Joey Carbstrong. There have been videos directly, like, I don't think I've ever showed screenshots. I don't think he said anything that interested me. But I've made videos where I said, oh, hey, look, Joey Carbstrong just said this to me, and here's my reply. There have been some videos like that. And there was a time when he thanked me for some videos I made on some subjects that helped him, where he was like, hey, look, this was intelligent to tell me. Do you think Joey Carbstrong doesn't talk to me because I'm too dumb? Now, I don't know. If I had a choice, maybe I wouldn't want to talk to Joey Carbstrong. So look, I heard a really simple thing in a podcast the other day. It's a pretty bad podcast, so I'm not going to shut it out. But there was a podcast talking about open relationships, and it made one of these really simple points. It's so important, but it's so simple you can ignore it. It said, look, you know what the most fundamental thing you need to make an open relationship work is, to make a polyamorous relationship work is, you need to be in a relationship with someone who is interested. in open relationships. Like that very simple. If they're not interested, if they're just not, doesn't mean they hate it, doesn't mean they're afraid of it, doesn't mean they have something psychological they have to get over in therapy, doesn't mean any of that. If they're not interested, they're not interested. And that's it. Like it was just a really kind of useful thing for someone in that position, kind of being a therapist on the issue, to do, is to say, look, you have to take it seriously if you're in love with someone who says they are not interested in other partners or 3 ways or 4 ways or what have you. This world is populated with communists who are not interested in finding out that Karl Marx's labor theory of value is wrong, that like there are actually false economic equations and ideas. There are debunked elements of Marxism, like apart from the more qualitative and moral and ethical questions about communism, like, and they are not interested. And there are anti-Semites and neo-Nazis and right-wing conspiracy theorists, and they are not interested. All of these things. And there are people who are drunk and are not interested in being sober. There's a kind of subtle but profound delusion in thinking, I know what is in your best interest, so therefore I'm going to preach to you and you're going to be interested. Because like objectively, from a detached perspective, it would help you. That's really deeply fundamentally wrong. And, you have to stop thinking about other people in terms of what they should do and start thinking about them in terms of what they want to do, what they desire to do. And then you have to stop preaching to people about what they should do. And you have to start thinking about what you as the preacher actually can do. And so a lot of these things, I think, begin and end with, I can't help you, I say that talent is scarce so often on this channel, but when I look back over the last 10 years, there were so many people who had a little bit of talent, and I tried to foster it and encourage it. And where the fuck are they now? And I know what happened to those people. But there were people I cared about them in that sense. And it is a very kind of mothering or very parental role you take on. And some older than me, not all people, but most of them younger than me, it's true, where you're really trying to kind of help develop this person's talent or talent. And, so it's one thing to say talent is scarce, like a snapshot taken with a camera. There's another thing to look back over 10 years and look at what it is that's producing that scarcity and reinforcing that scarcity. And the way in which, like it's easiest to talk about something like a vegan movement. The people are just dropping out of the vegan movement. You're losing talent in that sense. But it's also you're losing talent in the sense that people are becoming alcoholics and drug addicts, and people are signing up to lead a meaningless life rather than the life of the mind, so on and so forth. I remember I said to my grandmother, so my grandmother was an old woman at this time. I don't know, but she was approximately 100 years old. My grandmother complained to me that because she had this very regimented health diet and exercise plan that she wrote to her, but because of this, she had now lived for decades past all of her contemporaries. Like she'd had friends who she knew since high school, but they were all dead now, And I remember I just sat there and I said, sort of stroking my beard, I said, oh, I imagine that's tremendously satisfying to be the last man standing, to be the person who knows how everyone else's story ends, to be the kind of last surviving, to live for several decades beyond all your friends or everyone you knew. And she kind of slammed her fork down on the table and screamed at me, no, you have no idea how terrible it is. You have no idea how terrible it is to be alone. You have no idea how awful it is to be the last one alive. And she was really saying she would have preferred to have died decades earlier when her friends did, even though, whatever, she had a low cholesterol diet and exercised and did everything very, very rigorously, So that's about the most extreme, statement you can get. And, I have to stand by my statement. I think there is a certain kind of grim satisfaction. But yeah, do you want to be right or do you want to win? And it's easy to say, no, 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 I want to play to win. And when you're actually faced with those choices and the human realities and the human consequences, it's very, very hard to have that sang-froid. And yeah, I mean, it may not be the way you guys think about right and wrong, but I think it's actually quite warm to instead do the right thing just because it's right. Okay, guys. Melissa, if you want to say something, you can. I'm just going to glance at the comments that have rolled in. Go on.
Something that really made an impact on me many years ago was Eisel's phrase, I respect you enough to disrespect you.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't need to repeat anything that you said, but it may come across as disrespectful to be explaining something. And, you know, I do appreciate what you said.
And you've seen that even with my mother. That's true. Where it's like, look, I respect you enough to let you know you're wrong. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Go on, yeah.
No, I mean, I do appreciate that you also see the other side.
Yes.
Where, you know, you think, I understand you didn't sign up for this morality lecture.
Right.
And it's not enjoyable to be in your position. And also in the age gap relationships, you know,
Right.
I had older brothers, I had older cousins. Being myself the younger person in the position of giving a morality lecture to them now, and it's not for me. I don't know if someday I'll find some sense of satisfaction in it, but it's not satisfying now. I still wish that there was something that I could do or say that would spark this interest and
Right.
so yeah, that was just something that I was thinking.
I was going to say, so you mentioned this thing of, sorry. So what was the old catchphrase of mine?
I respect you enough to disrespect.
So in the last 6 years, how many times has that turned out positively for me? Like that methodology. Like my point is, I'm being self-critical here. So because you've seen, I remember there was this hilarious interview, this Skype call I had with Harrison Nathan. You know what I mean? There have been all these terrible Skype calls and interviews and meetings where I'm practicing my philosophy. And again, compared to this, this one British guy is an interesting.
I commend you for that, because you aren't somebody who's, you know, you are willing to do that, even though it will lead to you being, you know, alone. And you know, I know that's not the predetermined outcome from that. You have tried in so many different lanes, and I really respect that. I'm not just saying that because I'm trying to gas you up. Like, I really do admire that you've done that. I know you talked about, you know, people say that they admire you, but really secretly they harbor resentments and they will hate you or something. But
look, so we were at a dinner party. There was no dinner. It was a dinner party with a bunch of communists. It's very clear I could have walked away with a whole bunch of friends if I just pretended to be a communist. Which I have enough knowledge of communism to dissimulate that. What if, I mean, you know, again, like this thing about being alone or being right or what have you, you know, I'm not willing to pretend to be a communist. I'm not willing to pretend to be racist. I'm not willing to pretend to be, you know, something I'm not under a myriad headings. But within Buddhism too, like within Buddhism, it's no, I want to talk about slavery. I want to talk about racism within Buddhism. Slavery is a problem, racism is a problem. Meditation is a problem. There are a lot of things wrong with Buddhism. I am not going to pretend to be someone I'm not to be a part of this religion, or, for example, to be part of a humanitarian service that's paid for by Buddhist donations, or to be part of an academic research program that's connected to Buddhism or something. I don't bend that way. I'm a you know, so I mean, that's why I totally embrace it. Oh yeah, no, then you're choosing to be alone. You know, because I've been in so many contexts. I'm just being honest with you. The Department of Anthropology at Cambridge University is like this too. It's like either you are willing to sign up for and believe in this ludicrous, evil ideology, or you're not. And if you're not, you're alone and people treat you as their enemy, you know, because the belief itself is brittle. You know, it's believe. They can't stand to be around non-believers. And indeed, even at that one dinner party with no dinner, you saw how emotionally hard it was for true believing communists to have a conversation with me. And I really was being nice. I mean, I really was being witty and charming and silly and stuff, you know. And there are other contexts we don't even know. What if we met someone who's a wonderful guy? In many ways, he's a great guy, but he does duck hunting. You know what I mean? He's just one of those guys. You know what I mean? I can be comfortable in the room with him. It's not hard for me to be right. It's hard for him to be wrong. It's hard for him to feel that he's in the wrong, right? For all these things. And, I've dealt with this even with people's sex lives. I'm sorry, Cambridge and Oxford are good examples of this. I was around so many people at Cambridge and Oxford where they were a professor fucking their student, or they were a professor fucking their secretary, or both. And they had literally signed a contract. They had taken a vow. You will not sleep with any of your students. You will not sleep with like in that case, some workplaces are not like that. You can be a taxi driver and sleep with the people you give lifts to. Not every workplace is like that, but specifically a university campus. And, again, it's not hard for me. It's not hard for me to meet these people and talk to them. It's hard for them to be in the same room with me. Because it's like, guess what, bro? I'm old school. I'm Bronze Age. Where I come from, what you're doing is a death penalty offense. Like that's where I'm at with it. And again, I'm smiling and joking around about it. But it's, there's no moral ambiguity when you're dealing with me. And I'm not flattering you, and I'm not fawning you, and I'm not saying, oh, well, everybody does it. Nope. You took a vow. You gave your word. And you took your PhD and dragged it through the mud and crumpled it up and throw it away to fuck this whore while your wife was pregnant. Like, these are specific people I knew face to face. Like, that's why there are these details. You know what I mean? Like, it's real. And every combination of genders too. I mean, there were also gay men and bisexual men and other stuff. I'm just being honest with you. All the cases I really knew were heterosexual, but there was also that I heard a little bit about some of those things too. Can happen with the other gender combination. So my point is just to get beyond a clearly defined ideology like communism. So, communists sit down with me. They feel stupid. They feel ignorant. They feel wrong. They feel judged, whatever. But it can be anything, bro. You're trying to be friends. You're trying to be friends with them and see the best in them, but they use Prozac.
It can be their form of birth control. It can be anything.
Yeah. It can be that they're a video game addict, whatever,
Yeah.
Again, it's not hard for me to be friends with you when you're in the wrong. It's hard for you to be friends with me.
Yeah, no, I know. I know that feeling too.
And guess what? 19-year-olds are wrong about everything. 21-year-olds are wrong about 95% of things. When they get to 25, maybe they're 50-50. But like most of us, I was young once too. But it's like, if you want to be friends with younger people, 19, 20, 21, they're wrong about fucking everything. Go on, yeah. I mean, they feel denigrated on wrong all the time. They have to deal with that all the time. They have to deal with their own ignorance and mistakes and all the time. Go on.
Yeah, I sometimes have said to you, I know, I mean, this is just personal anecdote, but, I do kind of wonder if I had met somebody with your ideology when I was younger, how it would have impacted me. Because
maybe not at all. Maybe you would have just rejected it totally, right?
Yeah. I mean, yes, it's possible. I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's why I tend to agree with what you were saying about your criticism of J.J. McCullough's advice to befriend younger people, because they need guidance, right? But in this circumstance, he was very much determined to do what he did. And I don't know if the advice of an older colleague would have changed his perspective and made him not do that. I don't know.
The only advice I got from my professors at the University of Victoria was drop out and join the army, drop out and join the CIA, work for the CIA. That's the only advice they gave me ever. Now, my father is now deceased, but he was alive back at that time. My father couldn't give me advice about studying Chinese. I'm sorry, if you guys don't know, my father considered himself an intellectual. I'm sorry, your father also cannot give you advice about studying Chinese just for other reasons. Most people do not have a parent who can give them advice about something as obvious as how to study Chinese or how to have a career after that's what you study in university. That's not that esoteric. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's something that we've talked about. It's maybe not so useful to speak in the abstract about these things, but to think of actual people. To think of
Yes.
you talking to this
Yes.
actual person who was, getting involved with the alt-right forums online. I'm not sure
Yes.
all the
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
details, but you being the person to confront them, what would you say? And have you
Right.
actually been in that situation?
Right.
So yeah, no, and what are the impacts on you as the older party, who's trying to connect with younger people? Um, yeah,
Yeah. And I have been in that situation,
yeah,
and I get nothing out of it. I mean, I think with all
yeah,
friendships and all
right.
relationships, you also have to ask the question of cui bono.
Mhm.
And like again, so it's something. The easiest one is something like drug use. What do I get out of saying to someone again and again and again, you have to quit drinking alcohol, you have to quit doing drugs?
Yeah,
It's a totally asymmetrical relationship. So I get to say that again and again, and then watch this person ruin their life and ruin other people's lives and possibly ruin my life to some extent. So what a great friendship.
and
But
are you supposed
right,
to like, what is your demeanor supposed to be in
right,
that relationship? Are
right,
you supposed to maintain
right.
a cordial attitude when you
I
notice?
think you've never been in the room when I was talking to someone just about economics this way, but quite a few people over 10 years I've had this kind of intervention with about misconceptions about economics. Because people are like, you were never in the room when these conversations happened. But it's funny. So there were often people, they really believed in some fad idea about economics, whether it's something popularized by Alexander Ocasio-Cortez or something else. At that
Mhm.
time, it's this popular notion of economics. And very often the question to ask them is, okay, then what? Okay, so what happens next? Like right. So I'm not even going to overturn your economic theory. I'm just asking you what's the next step. So after the government prints an infinite amount of money, like a lot of these theories, they rest on these ideas. But one of them, it wasn't so that's so-called MMT, modern monetary theory. And it's like, no, okay, can you just talk me through what happens next, step by step? And of course, they start to recognize that they believe in a lie. And it is, in that case, it's really even more like a huge conspiracy lie, because there is a political wing trying to convince people this is true. But even, I remember talking to a guy, and he believed in the economic misconceptions that were associated with the "We Are the 99% movement, the Occupy Wall Street movement, that era,
Yeah.
and with certain documentaries that were made right at that time. So this is going back a lot of years. But those videos are still on the internet, still influence people, by the way. And again, so he had these misconceptions about the banking system and about fiat currency, the difference between fiat currency and gold. And again, the crucial part was just, okay, and now what? And then what happens next? And how is gold different from that? Like really just getting into deal with the implications of his own theory that way. But I'm just asking. So I am the older person. Well, in one case, the guy was the exact same age as me, actually. But anyway, as it happens. But okay, I am the wiser person. Is this friendship? Like, if I'm not getting paid to do this, if you're a very successful YouTuber, maybe you make money doing this. But
Yeah.
like, there is that other problem. And I think that's also why people are terrified of age gap sexual relationships.
Yeah.
Because when it's a sexual relationship, it's clear what's in it for you. Okay, well, you're getting laid. You're getting to sleep with this younger woman or multiple younger women, and therefore that's your motivation for this. But yeah, so one of the things I talked to this British guy about is Matt Dillahunty. I have many videos criticizing Matt Dillahunty. But something he said was that Matt Dillahunty is very frustrated with doing the same thing over and over again. Hot take. I mean, anyone can see this about Matt Dillahunty. He's giving the same advice. And he basically hates his audience, and he hates these people who phone in to talk to him. Again, not a really hot take. If you watch any of his shit, you can see that. Okay, well, coming back to a real season 1 concept here on à-bas-le-ciel, doesn't there have to be love in the game? Don't you have to love your audience or love the people you're trying to help? Like, imagine someone doing what Matt Dillahunty does, who loves these people, someone who loves these rednecks. Like, this is a redneck raised in the church, someone who really sits on a phone and loves these people and really cares about them and isn't a jackass and isn't insulting them for whatever reason they love them. Maybe they come out of that background. So maybe it's like, look, you remind me of my brother. My brother is a redneck just like you, but I want to help you. Like, imagine how different it is when there's love in the game. but it's exactly when there's love in the game that we're all terrified of it, right? That's where all these issues of power imbalance and is this exploitative and whatever. And that's where there's the most resentment. And again, people would rather do bad all by themselves and make them sick.
Yeah.
What an uplifting video. Let me do the questions in the audience. So we'll wrap it up. Yeah. Okay, so there was a comment from a vague rant here that says, quote, the keep your head down and don't rock the boat approach is sometimes not very easy, but there's a time and a place for everything. You just have to discern when it's worthwhile and pick your battles wisely. You know, I really think there is a difference between writing your own book and writing marginalia in someone else's book, you know? And it's the hardest thing in the world to say to a kid who's 19, you know what, if you really want to criticize your professor, you've actually got to write your own article or write your own book. That's actually how that works. You can't just put up your hand and say, no, but professor, you're wrong. And they will have seen other kids in class doing that, you know, from all different cultural backgrounds and all levels of ignorance and knowledge. Because, you know, sometimes it's the stupidest kid in the class who's doing that. And sometimes it's a kid who's a communist. And sometimes it's a kid who's a Nazi. I've been in those situations too. It's a kid who has a fringe belief, or I'm sorry, but I've been in this situation too. Sometimes it's a kid who was raised in a very protective, cloistered Muslim family and is very ignorant about the outside world. And they're just speaking that way. But all kinds of kids stand up and do that. I think it's just a very different thing to say, look, if you want to change the world, whether you do it on YouTube or you do it by writing a book or an article or an essay, this is just fundamentally not the way to do it. And again, what if you are on campus because you're trying to learn Chinese? That was my situation. It's like, I'm not here to challenge you. I'm not here to save. I'm here to learn Chinese. And tragically, the university couldn't even do that for me. So, these are truly bad and rotten institutions. I'm saying nothing to defend them. But today, you can publish on Amazon. Everyone can. You can publish on YouTube. You have something my generation didn't have. We had zines. We had photocopied magazines. We had to use a photocopier if we wanted our words to get out in the world. It's really fucked up. And we had public radio. That was the other place. And back then, that's what you would have said. You would have said, look, so I'll give you an example. You think your professors are racist. You got to get on public radio with that. Or you got to write an article and try to get it published. That's where you got to do that. You can't do it in the classroom in his face. You can't when he's teaching. And you know what? Quite possibly your professor is racist. Like, quite possibly you're right. Whatever the critique is, but you may also, your professor is a crazy communist. You want to criticize? Quite like, I've known plenty of crazy communists or professors. So yeah, and I just say, if you're an older, wiser person, you can guide a teenager through that. But for the average person, even at 19, it's very, very hard to see that path. And it's very easy to see how you can put up your hand and say, Miss. I remember one of my professors saying, I did not go to university for 15 years and get a PhD to be called Miss. You will call me professor, or you will call me doctor, or you will call me. But yeah, I mean, putting up your hand and saying miss and then complaining, there's really no way to win. So yeah, sorry, that's just a really bleak, depressing topic of conversation. So Vagrant mentions a movie here I've never seen. Quote, if only the world was like Good Will Hunting for every troubled student with every professor. I haven't seen Good Will Hunting. I would just say that in general, I think Hollywood movies have created really dangerous delusions about what high school is and what university is. They're really dangerous. And most people grow up, even comedies about that. And there are so many TV shows as well that sexualize the high school experience and dramatize and sexualize the university experience. The way American high schools, universities are depicted in cinema. Just being real with you, I mean, I think cop shows also have tremendous cultural influence. That's very problematic. But it's really it does the opposite of prepare people for what university and high school respectively are really about. So Good Will Hunting in particular, I can't launch into a critique of, but I'm just being real. Even cheerleader movies, even that kind of movie. Yeah, unfortunately, that is part of the problem. Vague Rant says, quote, "You can inspire other people by walking the walk and talking the talk." So I actually don't believe that. I made a YouTube video many years ago that is called "Leading by Example is Not Leading at All." And if you have a brother who is a drug addict, you can't just be an example of sobriety. You actually have to lay hands on this guy and save his life, if you want to save his life. Or you can shrug your shoulders and walk away and hear that he's dead 6 months later. But no, nobody is going to quit doing heroin or quit doing fentanyl or quit doing cocaine because you are walking the walk. Nobody. And look, I'll be real. I can even talk about within this relationship. I do not do recommended reading unless it's a specific book for a specific person. Like, you should read this book. I don't just say, hey, everyone in my audience should read this book. I really don't. You have to already know a lot about the history of the French Revolution and Napoleon to read this book, for example. Otherwise, it's completely wasted on you. You won't have any idea what's going on in the first 30 pages. That's why I don't do recommended reading away. But even just recommending that someone read Aristotle, no, you can't just leave by example. You can't just be like, well, here I am reading Aristotle. Here I am reading Plutarch or Polybius or some important that. Nope. You have to lay hands on. And again, whether you're talking about a parent raising a child, I even gave a lecture on this in China about how Chinese parents should raise and coach their own children in learning English. And it's the same kind of thing. No, you have to actually do it also as a parent, which is not what parents want to hear, of course. Parents want to just yell at their kids, and then the parents want to sit on the couch and watch TV while the kids are doing all the hard work of learning language. Yeah. So again, more quality comments from Vague Rant here. Vague Rant says that he reserves his criticism for people he loves or that he knows can be more or better. It's like a gift. I think that's typical of the current generation. And if you think about Athenian democracy, and even the Athenian system of courts, of everybody suing everyone else constantly, and everyone scrutinizing everyone else and dragging them into court for everything. I think unfortunately or fortunately, we need to have a culture of passionate mutual criticism, of examination and cross-examination in all directions at all times for democracy to function. But I'd be real with you, I think even for a monarchy to function. Did you want to say something on that? It's just, I remember we were at a certain kind of family dinner and you were asked what you think of Gretchen Whitmer. Yeah. And I think it was obvious the expectation was you were just going to say something bird brain like, oh, I think it's great that women are in politics. Like, I think the expectations of you were at that level. And no, we you need to live in a culture where there's, again, like there aren't just two political parties and two perspectives, but from many different perspectives and many different sides, steel sharpens steel. Everyone is becoming better informed and more cynical and more capable through, the kind of crossfire of criticism. Did you want to say something? I'm not dragging you into it, but
no, you're not dragging me into it. What people don't see off camera is usually that I'm just nodding in agreement because I do feel that this is so important, and that you need to just take the attitude of, no matter who it is that you meet, you should be skeptical of like everything, and that was so different in Alien from what I was raised with, right. And kind of let's conservative Christian kind of household, and this idea that if you talk to your neighbors, they'll it's just not what I was raised with.
Yeah.
But that is what I've learned in my life, is you should really be skeptical. And I really appreciate what you said about how this functioned with Athenian democracy.
Right.
This if you let someone prove to you that they have what it takes, to whatever it is. But with Athenian democracy, there's this, rhetoric and or oration.
Right.
There's this emphasis on like being able to speak for yourself and
Right.
have something to say.
And if you give a great lecture, you can literally be appointed the general of the army the next day.
Yes.
You can you can become a commander or general on the basis of, oh, you gave a really inspiring speech about what you think our foreign policy should be. Guess what? Now you're commanding this battalion in the war. You have
to be willing to stand up
right.
to the slings and arrows of the audience and
right.
this kind of thing.
Yeah,
which is really tough.
To cross-examine others and be cross-examined.
It's really tough. I get it.
Well, right. But the contrast in isolation is, so we were talking about Hamza. Hamza is able to believe all these ridiculous things in his isolation. Nobody cross-examines him. He doesn't cross-examine others.
Yeah,
isn't that
it's easy for him to say, like, if he gets I'm sure he gets many mean comments, but he can just say,
right,
oh, this person doesn't know what they're talking about, and I'm making a lot of money, or I'm having such a huge influence on people. I'm getting so many views on my videos, so what I'm saying must be.
It is possible for people to convince themselves that a 100% meat diet is healthy, and really only encounter positive reinforcement. So there are all these ludicrous things. So just say on the nutrition side, you get a set of examples. But I think also what we've been talking about intermittently through the whole video, what's going on in internet atheism in the past, say, 20 years is an example of that. Matt Dillahunty surrounds himself with a coven of cult followers, people of no intellectual substance who don't challenge him and who just reinforce his own bullshit. Matt Dillahunty never faces up to or thinks about the ways in which he's wrong, not even on veganism and nutrition, by the way, for example, but on all kinds of other issues. There's no learning, there's no growth, there's no development. And again, it's kind of funny because in a sense, there is the appearance of criticism, but actually there's no criticism and cross-examination and challenging growth there. Yeah. So I mean, I say the culture of criticism in all directions. It's really, really important.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think these are kind of two, seemingly unrelated, but really significant examples. We had a political issue here in Canada that went on and on and on for more than 10 years, which was people pretending that the building of oil pipelines was evil in itself and was destroying the environment. And there were just many, many ways in which this was factually wrong. And the particular oil pipeline, it was just a matter of renovating it, of improving the quality of the pipes. So it wasn't even a new pipeline, but it was like, look, here's the situation. You're moving oil. What is better for the environment? Moving oil in a truck, moving oil in a train, moving oil in a pipeline. Guess what the answer is? And there were all these misconceptions that the pipeline would destroy the forest. No, that the pipeline would have this, that, and the other terrible consequence. And it's like, no, there really was a factual sense in which if you want to deal with climate change, this isn't the way to do it. And the demonization and moralization of the pipeline issue is just wrong. And again, I'm sorry, but for me, the contrast is to ancient Greece, to the Pnyx, to Athens, and so on. And you just get to sit back and see the extent to which people refuse to listen and refuse to learn. And that includes people I've spoken to directly. I'm remembering a vegan Facebook group, which I probably got kicked out of years ago. It's like, no, I'm capable of backing this up. Fact. Here's the map of where the pipeline is. Here's this. And so what? But people don't want to feel wrong. They don't care. Sorry, they don't mind being wrong. They don't want to feel wrong. What was it? Yeah.
I keep. I don't want to,
Yeah.
But I was just thinking, if we had this kind of, you and I have had this experience of being in watching stand-up comedy.
Okay, yeah.
And you've seen just the kind of, you can sense when the room is like not really paying attention anymore to what, like we heard in the last, the last stand-up comedy that we saw, there was somebody that basically her set was maybe like 10 or 15 minutes, but I think probably like the room was only paying attention or only cared for like the first 5 minutes. And in that kind of situation, that's you've attended this show. This is what the setup is, and you just kind of have to, you're in for the ride, and you're buckled in. You can't leave. But what I like is this idea of the this this oration, right, in Athenian democracy. If Hamza was really in that position,
right,
he has kind of like he has this ability to upload videos where he's been speaking for an hour and a half about his whatever, how to increase testosterone. But do you think
by eating more salt?
Yeah, do you think it would really stand up if he were in a theater, like if he were in a stand-up comedy situation like this? Like how many people would boo him off stage, like at one point or the other? So that was all I wanted to say.
No. And my point is here, I'm not recklessly optimistic about human nature, but it's for that reason that you need all this examination, cross-examination. So, look, I just say, even with a democracy populated by imbeciles, you should be able to stumble your way through the pipeline issue. You should be able to stumble your way through the relationship between global warming and meat production. It's not that hard to figure out, okay? The total number of mammals, total number of cows. Well, there are a lot of these issues where it's like, look, even if we're all equally ignorant, even if like everyone only has a high school level of education, we should be able to have these debates, have this criticism and cross-examination, and collectively, step by staggering step, with some lurching to the left and right along the way, a democracy should be able to reason its way through this and then come to a kind of consensus about something as obvious as an oil pipeline. But we can't. Like, the level of education and the level of intellectual engagement in Canada is too low for that. Now, again, another example, I've been sharing these outrageous news stories about it. The idea that you should decriminalize and even cocaine, heroin, fentanyl, and even provide, and methamphetamine, and even provide drug addicts with these drugs for free injections, the so-called harm reduction approach to drug addiction. To say it has been debunked is an understatement. Now, hey guys, here's a really simple thought experiment. What if we had the same policy towards alcohol and drunk driving that we now have towards cocaine, heroin, fentanyl, methamphetamine? What if we provided drunk drivers with free alcohol? Like, does this make sense to you? What if we encouraged people to drink more alcohol and to not feel that there's any stigma about alcoholism? How would that work? What would the outcomes be? Well, surprise, the grand social experiment undertaken in Seattle, Portland, Oregon, Vancouver, many other cities that decided that drug addicts just shouldn't feel any stigma and they shouldn't be arrested and shouldn't be put in prison. There shouldn't be stop and seizure. That either de facto or de jure, legalized drug addiction. Well, the outcomes are incredibly predictable. Oh, hey, meanwhile, on the other side of planet Earth, there's a country called Japan where none of this bullshit flies, and the rates of drug addiction the rates of unemployment are close to zero. The rates of drug addiction are close to zero. The rates of burglary, theft, murder are all incredibly close to zero. They do have other crimes, by the way, like credit card fraud. There is other criminal activity. But the kind of street crime people live in fear of is unknown. It's so rare in Japan. You can look up right now how many murders per annum there are in Japan. You can look up drug addict treatment centers in Japan. But guess what? Walking around the streets of Tokyo doesn't look like Portland, Oregon. It doesn't look like Seattle. It doesn't look like Philadelphia or any of these other disaster areas. Okay, well, you know what? Again, staggering, lurching from left to right, however imperfectly, right? As a democracy, we should be able to learn, even if we're just learning from ignorance and we're just learning from, again, kind of examination and cross-examination and demagoguery and speechifying, that we should be able to make that progress. But we can't, And again, sorry, I'm going from macrocosm to microcosm. I'm just being real with you. I think this is why. I think it's because on the level of friendship, on the level of one person's relationship with one person, we have created a culture, and perhaps it is global, but in my experience, it's not just America or Canada. It's also England, France, Germany, Taiwan, China. It seems to me to cut across all cultures or most cultures. I mean, maybe Papua New Guinea is an exception, but this is nearly a global phenomenon. I think people conduct their private lives in a way that is so narrow and so brittle and so resistant to feeling wrong, to the discovery that you have been wrong, you know, and then the willingness to change, and the ones, oh well, now we have to do something different, you know. I remember there was a guy. Sorry, it's just not worth telling this whole story. He took as his pen name a word that had a double meaning. So he took as his, it was a word that meant both fast breaking and fast broken. It meant both. You know, I just remember reading that and thinking about that. It's like, yeah, you know, one of the most important redeeming qualities you can have is not being a hypocrite, but being willing to actually break with your prior beliefs, to actually look back on the assumptions you had maybe just a few minutes ago or a few hours ago and laugh and say how foolish I was, how silly of me, and take on new perspectives and what have you. You know, and again, maybe I'm too far, and that maybe like just psychologically as a type, I'm an extreme example of someone at that end of things where I'm too eager to debunk my own assumptions and take on new directions and what have you. But yeah, you know, look. So again, I can pump my own book here. I can promote, you know, No More Manifestos. I do. I mean, I do think one of the things Canada has in common with Japan is that most people, they think of their education as a very narrow preparation for one job that they then hold on to for the rest of their lives. And whatever that job is, even if it is not mindless, repetitive labor when you first got the job, it is by the end, right? Like, you know, okay, people are willing to look at a factory job as mindless, repetitive labor where you're just doing the same mechanical process again. Well, guess what? Being an optometrist, we may respect that culturally. The first 6 months you're an optometrist, maybe it's all new and exciting. But whether it's after 6 months or 6 years, sooner or later, being an optometrist becomes just as mechanical, just as repetitive, just as mindless, and just as denigrating and oppressive for you as factory work. It's the same thing over and over again every day. And one of the most common things that's said about the Japanese, and there are stats to back this up, you know, when they lose their job, they commit suicide. You know, they're said, like, most of them feel like there was only one job they could ever do. And when that career doesn't work out, that's it. They're just ruined. And if they don't commit suicide, they do things like just lock themselves in their apartment and never talk to anyone for 10 years and stuff. This is a common thing with Japanese. Now, okay, our own culture is different in some ways, but you know, I mean, I'm sorry, but you know, I never met anyone who read Aristotle the way I did. Nobody forced me to read Aristotle. You know, I didn't read Aristotle for a course. I didn't read Aristotle for a job. I read Aristotle for me, for my future, for who I want to be 5 years from now. You know what I mean? And I'm in my whole fucking life, even at Cambridge University, even at Oxford University, even in these supposedly elite contexts, I've never met anyone else who just had a fucking positive attitude towards learning. Everyone else, again, globally, including China, their whole attitude is that people only learn through coercion. They themselves are only willing to learn through coercion, whether that's the threat of being beaten if they don't do it, or that they'll get paid money if they do, et cetera. You know what I mean? Whatever it is. And then they live their lives in this tremendously narrow way. So I just say, and again, the main topic of this conversation was friendship and age gap friendships, and then the way in which they make friends and don't make friends. And again, I'm sorry, the way in which they kick me out of a Facebook group. Do you have any idea how many vegan Facebook groups I've been banned from or something? You know what I mean? Like, you know, the fact that they're not willing to listen to any opinion or any perspective that makes them feel wrong about anything, whether that's their sex life or their drug life or their political life. So, you know, they spend their whole lives manufacturing and defending this sort of single serving size mythology. It's a myth that's not meant for anyone else. It's a myth that's just meant for me. And I mean, I'm just being real with you. I talk to left-wing people, and they don't care if what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says about economics is wrong. They want to believe in it anyway. They prefer their own fiction to factor reality. That's it. And you talk to people in the right wing, and there's something similar. So yeah, sorry, but I mean, this is kind of the great problem over time. I'm just talking about from the perspective of friendship. Given that we live in a world where the vast majority of learning is not going to happen in formal education, how is it going to happen? You could have a friend who fucking reads Aristotle with you. Because I'm sorry, I just don't think you're going to get it. You want to jump in? Is something you want to say?
Yeah, well, I would just say, when I first met Isel, I didn't have these positive attitudes toward learning before I ever met you. Let's just rewind. I'm sorry. I know this is just autobiographical, so I'm sorry if it's boring.
Still matters.
But I will just say, I reached out to you in part because I knew that we had this age gap, right?
Yes.
And I knew it probably just wouldn't, nothing would come of it, but I just thought I really want to let this person know that they've had an impact on my life. I reached out to you and I said what I did. But it was in part this recognition that, there's something that I'm missing here. I really need to become this more educated person. I could sense that, and I didn't know what was possible, when I did reach out to you, given that you're 14 years older than me, it was, and I recognize, for me, I was just talking about this situation with Hamza and the crowd and how they would respond. I recognize in that system, I would fail. I'm not that well spoken, and I wasn't when I first met you. I just didn't have any practice with debate club or anything like that. But still, I do think it's just really important to have this public discussion, and I really appreciate that about your content, what you did. You did publicly criticize people, but it was in a way that, if it wasn't directly helpful to that person that he was criticizing, it would be helpful to the general audience, that you could learn something from that. So I just say, coming back to the major leitmotif of this video, I reached out to you, and I wanted to.
So I'm the last person. Okay, I'm the last person to idealize the culture that the United States of America had at the time of the American Revolution. I'm the last person to do that. But I've said this many times, and I think it's a very instructive example. How did Benjamin Franklin build his political status and influence? It was through book reading clubs. He first started one book reading club, round table, where you read the book and then came in and discussed it. And so many people wanted to join. He set up a network of book reading clubs, of connected book reading clubs. And then he started collecting donations from the people and setting up a library and whatever. And he had this whole network of people. Okay, but let's just think about step one there. Okay, and again, I am not lonely, but I am alone. Have you ever in your fucking life had a circle of friends who all read Aristotle together? I'm doing this for Melissa right now. I'm reading the book again. You know what I mean? And at many points, there have also been books I literally sit and read out loud with Melissa or to Melissa. Normally, it's I read a paragraph, she reads a paragraph, we actually sit and read out loud together. There are all kinds of ways in which I encourage and reward Melissa reading, including she reads and we go for a long walk and talk about the book she's reading. So again, and this is a kind of education engagement you will never get from a university professor, unless you're fucking your university professor. Anyway, so I just say my own primary partner relationship is an exception to this rule. But I'm just saying, whether I reflect on your life or you reflect on your life, you have probably never had an experience anything like what was a normal daily reality for Benjamin Franklin. And again, in many ways, his society was at a lower intellectual caliber than we're at now. And you can imagine showing up for a book club and being disappointed with the intellectual caliber of everyone there. But look, I used to say all the time, I didn't get involved in veganism in order to be alone, right? I didn't get involved in humanitarian work in order to be alone. I didn't get involved in Korean Ojibwe to be alone. Okay, so you guys know I'm tempted now to start working on both ancient Latin and modern Spanish. Think I want to do that to be alone? Well, again, so I mean, you scale it up and you have a society that's incapable of democracy in all these ways. But at that lower, most intimate scale, we seem to have a society that's incapable of friendship. And I guess I can say it's incapable of friendship with or without the age gap.